please be seated. So we can start now. May I invite all participants to all stand up for our Cambodian national anthem, please. Today's regional conference is attended by nearly 100 participants, and we have our friends from 6 countries, Cambodia, Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, the Philippines, and Timor-Leste. I would like to give an overview of the program today. We will start with the opening video of the regional conference, and we will have opening remarks from our speaker, keynote speech on mapping of media freedom in Southeast Asia, and we will
recording in progress.
Panel discussion, and in the afternoon we will have breakout session, and also one of the most important session is Southeast Asia collaboration signing, and we will end the program with the solidarity dinner. Would be exciting to end the program tonight. So now I would like all participants to watch our video clip to open the regional conference.
We hope that being a part of this collaboration can improve solidarity not only among media practitioners in Malaysia but across the region towards a better state of press freedom for all.
I hope that by engaging with each other and working together, our organizations will pick up best practices from each other. With stronger collaboration across the region, we will be able to amplify each other's campaigns, alert each other about the threats and attacks on media in our countries, and support each other when needed.
So through this collaboration, we expect that more and more independent journalists will get more support, and also will work more freely through the support, and also through the action that will be addressed by the regional collaboration.
Alliance, please come to the podium for the opening remark. Thank you.
Recording in progress.
បាទសូមអនុញ្ញាតជម្រាបសួរហើយដោយសារតែយើងមានអ្នកបកប្រែចឹងខ្ញុំសូមនិយាយជាភាសាខ្មែរបាទ បាទជាបឋមខ្ញុំសូមគោរពអាដាមមាសភ័ណ្ឌអនុរដ្ឋលេខាធិការនិងជាអ្នកនាំពាក្យក្រសួងព័ត៌មានលោកស្រីអ៊ីកាក៏ដូចជាតំណាងដៃគូខាង IG មកពីប្រទេសឥណ្ឌូនេស៊ីអស់លោកស្រីនាងកញ្ញាតំណាងមូលនិធិអង្គការជាតិអន្តរជាតិនិងអ្នកសារព័ត៌មានក៏ដូចជាភ្ញៀវជាតិអន្តរជាតិទាំងអស់ដែលមានវត្តមាននៅក្នុងកម្មវិធីដកដងដំនៅថ្ងៃនេះខ្ញុំពិតជាមានសេចក្តីសោមនស្សរីករាយក្នុងការស្វាគមន៍ដ៏កក់ក្ដៅចំពោះវត្តមានរបស់ឯកឧត្តមលោកស្រីនាងកញ្ញាមិត្តភ័ក្តិមកពីតំបន់ដែលបានចូលរួមជួបជុំគ្នាដើម្បីបង្ហាញនូវការបដិញ្ញាចិត្តរួមគ្នានៅថ្ងៃនេះក្នុងកិច្ចសហប្រតិបត្តិការដើម្បីសេរីភាពសារព័ត៌មាននៅក្នុងតំបន់ការចាប់ផ្ដើមនៅកិច្ចសហប្រតិបត្តិការជាមួយនឹងអង្គការក្នុងតំបន់ដែលរួមមានសម្ព័ន្ធអ្នកសារព័ត៌មានឯករាជ្យពីប្រទេសឥណ្ឌូនេស៊ីសហជីពអ្នកសារព័ត៌មានជាតិនៃប្រទេសហ្វីលីពីន NUJP សម្ព័ន្ធអ្នកសារព័ត៌មាននៃប្រទេសម៉ាឡេស៊ី JERAM មជ្ឈមណ្ឌលដើម្បីសារព័ត៌មានឯករាជ្យ CIJ ម៉ាឡេស៊ី Festival Film International Malaysia សមាគមសារព័ត៌មានប្រទេសទីម៉័រ AJTL និងប្រជាថៃរួមជាមួយនឹងកម្ពុជាគឺជាការចាប់ផ្ដើមធ្វើសកម្មភាពរួមគ្នាមួយកម្រិតទៀតដើម្បីធ្វើឲ្យប្រសើរឡើងផ្នែកសេរីភាពសារព័ត៌មាននិងការការពារដល់ការអនុវត្តការងាររបស់អ្នកសារព័ត៌មានជាពិសេសគឺអ្នកសារព័ត៌មានឯករាជ្យខ្ញុំគិតថានេះគឺជាគំនិតផ្ដួចផ្ដើមមួយដ៏ល្អហើយចាំបាច់បំផុតបន្ទាប់ពីមានការវាយប្រហារដោយជំងឺ Covid-19 និងការធ្វើឲ្យសេរីភាពសារព័ត៌មានកាន់តែរួមតូចនៅក្នុងបណ្ដាប្រទេសជាច្រើននៅក្នុងពិភពលោកនៅក្នុងតំបន់អាស៊ានក៏ដូចជានៅក្នុងប្រទេសកម្ពុជាខ្ញុំនៅចាំបានថានៅក្នុងវេទិកាពិនិត្យមើលឡើងវិញអំពីផែនការរបស់អង្គការសហប្រជាជាតិដើម្បីសុវត្ថិភាពរបស់អ្នកសារព័ត៌មាននិងសកម្មភាពដើម្បីបញ្ចប់នីតិរដ្ឋភាពលើអ្នកសារព័ត៌មានមានថ្នាក់ដឹកនាំរដ្ឋាភិបាលជាច្រើនបាននិយាយថាប្រទេសដែលមានប្រជាធិបតេយ្យរឹងមាំមិនខ្លាចការរិះគន់នោះទេហើយគេបានអួតអាងអំពីការសរសើរអំពីទឹកដីរបស់គេដែលជាទីកន្លែងឋានសួគ៌នៃសេរីភាពបញ្ចេញមតិនិងការអនុវត្តសេរីភាពសារព័ត៌មានជាការពិតណាស់សេរីភាពសារព័ត៌មានហើយនឹងអ្នកសារព័ត៌មានឯករាជ្យនឹងមានពហុភាពក៏ដូចជាភាពចម្រុះនៃប្រព័ន្ធផ្សព្វផ្សាយគឺជាឆ្អឹងខ្នងនៃលទ្ធិប្រជាធិបតេយ្យឯកឧត្តមលោកស្រីអ្នកនាងកញ្ញាអ្នកសារព័ត៌មានទាំងអស់ជាទីគោរពនិងជាទីរាប់អានដើម្បីឆ្លើយតបនៅការអំពាវនាវឲ្យមានសកម្មភាពច្រើនថែមទៀតនិងប្រកបដោយប្រសិទ្ធភាពក្នុងការឆ្លើយតបនឹងការធ្វើទុកបុកម្នេញតាមរូបភាពផ្សេងលើអ្នកសារព័ត៌មាននោះយើងត្រូវតែចាប់ផ្ដើមជាមួយគ្នានឹងការគ្រប់គ្រងនិងការបង្កើតឲ្យមាននៅយន្តការដែលមានចីរភាពមានសមត្ថភាពនិងមានលទ្ធភាពគ្រប់គ្រាន់យន្តការនេះទៀតសោតគួរតែបន្ថែមឲ្យមានទៅតាមមូលដ្ឋានរួមទាំងតំបន់ឆ្ងាយពីទីក្រុងនិងការធ្វើឲ្យមានបន្ថែមទៀតនៅថ្នាក់តំបន់ដែលជាសម្ព័ន្ធភាពមិនអាចខ្វះបាននៅក្នុងយុគសម័យ Digital ការរីកចម្រើនបច្ចេកវិទ្យានិងការអភិវឌ្ឍធនធានគំនិតបញ្ញារបស់ប្រជាពលរដ្ឋជាពិសេសយុវជនគឺកំពុងតែคล้ายជាគុណតម្លៃមួយក្នុងការជំរុញឲ្យមានការទទួលខុសត្រូវសង្គមគណនេយ្យភាពសង្គមនិងការឲ្យមានសង្គមដែលមានតម្លាភាពយ៉ាងណាមិញការរីកចម្រើននេះក៏ជះឥទ្ធិពលអវិជ្ជមានដល់ការងាររបស់អ្នកសារព័ត៌មានវិជ្ជាជីវៈប្រព័ន្ធផ្សព្វផ្សាយប្រពៃណីនិងបង្កើននូវការផ្សព្វផ្សាយព័ត៌មានមិនពិតឬព័ត៌មានដែលត្រូវបានបង្កើតឡើងជាប្រជាពិធផងដែរឯកឧត្តមអស់លោកស្រីនាងកញ្ញាអ្នកសារព័ត៌មានទាំងអស់ជាទីរាប់អានខ្ញុំសង្ឃឹមថាយន្តការនៃកិច្ចសហប្រតិបត្តិការតំបន់នៅថ្ងៃនេះ
អាចជួយជំរុញយន្តការនិងស្ថាប័នដែលធ្វើកិច្ចការនៅក្នុងប្រទេសនីមួយៗឲ្យមានភាពរឹងមាំបន្ថែមទៀតតាមរយៈការគៀកោធនធានការពង្រឹងសមត្ថភាពបង្កើតសាមគ្គីភាពនិងធ្វើកិច្ចសហការរួមគ្នាដើម្បីធ្វើឲ្យមានសម្លេងកាន់តែរឹងមាំក្នុងការដាក់ចេញនៅសកម្មភាពជួយគ្រប់គ្រងដល់អ្នកសារព័ត៌មានមួយវិញទៀតខ្ញុំពិនិត្យឃើញថាកិច្ចសហប្រតិបត្តិការនេះអាចនឹងនាំមកនៅការចែករំលែកបទពិសោធន៍ចំពោះយន្តការកម្រិតជាតិដែលមាននៅតាមបណ្ដាប្រទេសនីមួយៗហើយចូលរួមដើម្បីបង្កើតឲ្យមានយន្តការទាំងអស់នោះនៅតាមប្រទេសដែលមិនទាន់មានយន្តការនេះនៅឡើយជាឧទាហរណ៍ការបង្កើតនៅក្រុមប្រឹក្សាអ្នកសារព័ត៌មានជាតិការបង្កើតនៅជំរកសុវត្ថិភាពជាបណ្ដោះអាសន្នសម្រាប់ជនដែលងាយរងគ្រោះស្ថាប័នសារព័ត៌មានសាធារណៈដែលយើងហៅថា public media សារព័ត៌មាននៅតាមសហគមន៍យើងហៅថា community media ការបង្កើតឲ្យមាននៅមជ្ឈមណ្ឌលបណ្ដុះបណ្ដាលច្រើនបន្ថែមទៀតដើម្បីបង្កើនការវឹកវើសម្រាប់វិស័យសារព័ត៌មាននិងការបង្កើតឲ្យមានមូលនិធិឆ្លើយតបនៅក្នុងគ្រាអាសន្នជាដើមមួយវិញទៀតតាមរយៈកិច្ចសហប្រតិបត្តិការនេះខ្ញុំក៏ទទូចឲ្យមានការយកចិត្តទុកដាក់បន្ថែមទៀតដល់សកម្មភាពដើម្បីលើកទឹកចិត្តនៅការចូលរួមរបស់ស្ត្រីឲ្យកាន់តែមានចំនួនច្រើនឡើងបន្ថែមទៀតនៅក្នុងវិស័យសារព័ត៌មានបើពិនិត្យដាច់ដライនៅកម្ពុជាចំនួនស្ត្រីគឺមានចំនួនរហូតដល់ជាង 50% នៃចំនួនប្រជាពលរដ្ឋសរុបក៏ប៉ុន្តែចំនួនស្ត្រីដែលបានចូលរួមនៅក្នុងវិស័យសារព័ត៌មានគឺមានប្រមាណតែ 20% ប៉ុណ្ណោះការធានាពីសុវត្ថិភាពនិងការបញ្ចប់នីតិរដ្ឋភាពគឺជាសកម្មភាពដែលចាំបាច់បំផុតហើយត្រូវធ្វើជាបន្ទាន់ដើម្បីលើកទឹកចិត្តដល់ស្ត្រីឲ្យចូលរួមនៅក្នុងវិស័យនេះជាគន្លឹះមួយបន្ថែមទៀតយើងក៏គួរតែស្វែងរកវិធីបន្ថែមទៀតផងដែរដើម្បីស្ដារទំនុកចិត្តសាធារណជនមកលើវិស័យសារព័ត៌មានឯកឧត្តមលោកស្រីនាងកញ្ញាអ្នកសារព័ត៌មានទាំងអស់ជាទីគោរពនិងជាទីរាប់អានមុននឹងបញ្ចប់ខ្ញុំបាទសូមថ្លែងអំណរគុណដល់ម្ចាស់មូលនិធិដែលគាំទ្រគំនិតផ្ដួចផ្ដើមនេះដែលរួមមានទីភ្នាក់ងារសហរដ្ឋអាមេរិកដើម្បីប្រព័ន្ធផ្សព្វផ្សាយពិភពលោកយើងហៅថា US Agency for Global Media ប្រទេសកាណាដានិងព្រះរាជាណាចក្រ Netherlands ខ្ញុំបាទសូមគោរពជូនពរឯកឧត្តមលោកស្រីនាងកញ្ញាសូមទទួលបានជោគជ័យថ្មីបន្ថែមទៀតនៅក្នុងបេសកកម្មដើម្បីបម្រើប្រជាពលរដ្ឋនិងជួយជ្រោមជ្រែងសង្គមរបស់យើងឲ្យកាន់តែមានភាពល្អប្រសើរសូមអរគុណ
Thank you, Mr. Novi, for your opening remark. May I now invite Ms. Ika Ningtyas, Secretary General of the Alliance Journalists Independent from Indonesia, to give her remark. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I will give a remark in English, so sorry for Cambodian participant, but we provide a translation. Okay, thank you for Mr. Mia Sophorn, a spokesperson from the Information Ministry of Cambodia, our colleagues from Indonesian, Cambodian journalists, from Philippines, Malaysia, Timor-Leste, and Thailand. Also for other organizations, USGM, good morning, UNESCO representative, Internews in Asia, International Media Support in Asia, and etc. Thank you for everyone for joining this event. I'm happy to finally meet you in person after 2 years of facing the COVID-19 pandemic. This conference is the first to be initiated by 6 journalist organizations in Southeast Asia, so welcome to all. I don't want to go into much detail about how dark the press freedom situation is that we face together in most countries in Southeast Asia. It's all been covered in many of studies, the annual index or country report. The shrinking of the press freedom climate is shown by the strengthening of impunity of crime against journalists. According to CPJ Impunity Index this year, the Philippines and Myanmar are among the 11 countries considered worst in pursuing journalist killers. Media outlets in Southeast Asia face pressure from increasingly authoritarian government, increased digital attack, and a number of draconian laws that make it easy for every journalist to be dragged to jail. With the exception of Timor-Leste, the press freedom ranking of most Southeast Asian countries, according to RSF in this year, are above 100 or in dangerous situation. Myanmar has the lowest ranking after the military coup in 2021. Continue with the Philippines and Cambodia after continuous attack by the actual state or non-actual state. In my country, Indonesia, 6 days ago, a new criminal code was passed. The criminal code contains 17 articles that can bring journalists to prison. This is a setback of our democracy, but I know that our fate is the same, facing the decline of democracy that affecting of regional press freedom. Today, we will discuss more about what we can still do together. I see that number of journalist organizations in Southeast Asia are still strong enough to fight off repression. You are the guardian of press freedom at the front line, but of course, we cannot work alone. Journalist organizations in Southeast Asia have had long experience of regional collaboration to protect press freedom and independent media. We must take the spirit of the past, improve what is lacking, and evolve according to the demand of the time. Digital spaces are giving more complex threat, but we can use the internet tools to expand our collaboration and gain public support to jointly safeguard of press freedom. Today's conference and collaboration came from online discussion a year ago. It started the same anxiety and the same hope. We must to start again. Hopefully in the future, this collaboration, but the first step to move together, strengthen each other, learn from the best experience from each country, and also provide solidarity to each organization. Of course, none of this would be possible without the support of our partners. I thank the Embassy of the Netherlands and the Embassy of Canada in Indonesia, also USGM in Asia. Thank you, including all the institutions who present today supporting this new collaboration. May we continue to move forward together. Hopefully we can take some inspiration, initiative to build effective protection for journalists in Southeast Asia. Before I stop this piece, could we show the statement together? Okay, if I say protect human rights, please you can continue say protect press freedom. Okay, we can try. And you can raise your left hand. It's okay. So it's like energize, forgive spirit for our conference. Okay, we can try. Trial session. Protect human rights. Protect press freedom. Thank you. Once more. If I say save democracy, please you can continue with say protect press freedom. Save democracy. Protect press freedom. Thank you, everyone, and good discussion.
Thank you, Ms. Ika, for your energizing speech. Now may I invite His Excellency Ms. Sopon, a representative from the Ministry of Information of the Kingdom of Cambodia, to give his remark.
Bà សូមអនុញ្ញាតជំរាបសួរលោកលោកស្រី ភ្ញៀវជាតិអន្តរជាតិដែលមានវត្តមាននៅក្នុងអង្គសន្និសីទរបស់យើងនាថ្ងៃនេះ Good morning from Cambodia to our foreign friend who come to in Cambodia and welcome to Cambodia and have a nice day in Cambodia. I would like to speak in our language so you have a translation. Okay. ជាបឋមសូមគោរពលោកណប់វីនាយកប្រតិបត្តិកម្ពុជាលោកស្រីអ៊ីកានិងយ៉ាសតំណាង AJI ភ្ញៀវជាតិអន្តរជាតិលោកស្រីអ្នកនាងកញ្ញាទាំងអស់ដែលមានវត្តមាននៅទីនេះជាកិច្ចចាប់ផ្ដើមក្នុងនាមក្រសួងព័ត៌មាននិងក្នុងនាមខ្លួនខ្ញុំផ្ទាល់ខ្ញុំមានសេចក្តីសោមនស្សរីករាយយ៉ាងក្រៃលែងដែលបានចូលរួមជាមួយនឹងលោកស្រីអ្នកនាងកញ្ញាទាំងអស់នៅក្នុងកម្មវិធីបើកសន្និសីទថ្នាក់តំបន់ស្ដីអំពីកិច្ចសហប្រតិបត្តិការដើម្បីសេរីភាពសារព័ត៌មាននៅអាស៊ីអាគ្នេយ៍ដែលបានរៀបចំឡើងដោយកម្ពុជាសហការជាមួយនឹងអង្គការជាដៃគូពាក់ព័ន្ធនៅក្នុងតំបន់នាពេលនេះខ្ញុំក៏សូមឆ្លៀតយកឱកាសនេះសម្ដែងនៅការស្វាគមន៍យ៉ាងកក់ក្ដៅចំពោះការរៀបចំសន្និសីទនេះឡើងនាពេលនេះផងដែរលោកស្រីអ្នកនាងកញ្ញាជាទីរាប់អានខ្ញុំយល់ឃើញថាសន្និសីទនាថ្ងៃនេះវានឹងអាចផ្ដល់នៅឱកាសដល់គ្រប់ភាគីពាក់ព័ន្ធទាំងអស់បានសិក្សានិងបានចែករំលែកនៅបទពិសោធន៍ពីគ្នាទៅវិញទៅមកនៅក្នុងការអនុវត្តសិទ្ធិសេរីភាពសារព័ត៌មាននិងកាតព្វកិច្ចរបស់ខ្លួននៅក្នុងការលើកកម្ពស់សេរីភាពសារព័ត៌មានឲ្យកាន់តែប្រសើរឡើងបន្ថែមទៀតនៅតាមបណ្ដាប្រទេសនីមួយៗនិយាយដោយឡែកនិងនិយាយជារួមនៅក្នុងតំបន់អាស៊ានទាំងមូលខ្ញុំយល់ឃើញថាសិក្ខាសាលានេះវាជាឱកាសមួយដែលយើងអាចនឹងបានចែករំលែកនៅក្នុងការអនុវត្តរបស់អ្នកអនុវត្តផ្នែកវិជ្ជាជីវៈសារព័ត៌មានដើម្បីរកឲ្យឃើញនៅអ្វីដែលជាភាពខុសគ្នានិងភាពរួមគ្នានៃបរិបទស្ថានភាពសង្គមសេដ្ឋកិច្ចវប្បធម៌និងបែបផែនប្រពៃណីនៃបណ្ដាប្រទេសនីមួយៗដើម្បីធ្វើយ៉ាងណាលើកកម្ពស់សិទ្ធិជាមូលដ្ឋានសិទ្ធិសេរីភាពសារព័ត៌មាននៅតាមបណ្ដាប្រទេសរៀងៗខ្លួនហើយទន្ទឹមនឹងនោះក៏យើងនឹងពិនិត្យនិងពិភាក្សាស្វែងរកឲ្យឃើញផងដែរថាតើអ្វីខ្លះដែលជាការទទួលខុសត្រូវអ្វីខ្លះជាកាតព្វកិច្ចក្នុងនាមយើងជាអ្នកអនុវត្តវិជ្ជាជីវៈមួយដើម្បីធានាបានថាការទទួលបាននៅសិទ្ធិសេរីភាពពេញលេញសិទ្ធិសេរីភាពដែលធានាដោយច្បាប់លិខិតបទដ្ឋាននានាគឺត្រូវបំពេញដោយត្រឹមត្រូវនិងអនុវត្តទៅតាមអ្វីដែលជាគោលការណ៍ជាកាតព្វកិច្ចនិងការទទួលខុសត្រូវរបស់យើងខ្ញុំយល់ឃើញថាការអនុវត្តវិជ្ជាជីវៈមួយប្រកបដោយភាពត្រឹមត្រូវការប្រកាន់ភ្ជាប់នៅក្រមសីលធម៌វិជ្ជាជីវៈនៅក្នុងការអនុវត្តវិជ្ជាជីវៈមួយជារឿងចាំបាច់ហើយការអនុវត្តវិជ្ជាជីវៈមួយដែលត្រឹមត្រូវក៏វាបង្ហាញអំពីមោទនភាពបង្ហាញអំពីសេចក្តីថ្លៃថ្នូរនិងកិត្តិយសរបស់អ្នកប្រកបវិជ្ជាជីវៈទាំងអស់នោះផងដែរក៏ប៉ុន្តែទន្ទឹមនឹងនោះដើម្បីទទួលបាននៅការឲ្យតម្លៃនិងការផ្ដល់នៅការទុកចិត្តបែបនេះថាតើក្នុងនាមជាអ្នកអនុវត្តវិជ្ជាជីវៈមួយតើយើងត្រូវមានកាតព្វកិច្ចនិងការទទួលខុសត្រូវសង្គមបែបណាតើការអនុវត្តវិជ្ជាជីវៈមួយដែលត្រឹមត្រូវដែលយើងគិតទាំងអស់គ្នាថាជាមោទនភាពសម្រាប់វិជ្ជាជីវៈមួយនេះហើយវានឹងប៉ះពាល់ទៅដល់ជាតិទៅដល់តំបន់ថាតើវាជាជំរើសដែលល្អដែរឬទេសម្រាប់អ្នកអនុវត្តវិជ្ជាជីវៈមួយឆ្លៀតក្នុងឱកាសនេះខ្ញុំក៏សូមចូលរួមជាមួយនឹងលោកស្រីអ្នកនាងកញ្ញាទាំងអស់ដែលមានវត្តមាននេះនៅក្នុងការចែករំលែកព័ត៌មានមួយចំនួនពាក់ព័ន្ធទៅនឹងបរិបទជាក់ស្ដែងនៅក្នុងប្រជាជាតិកម្ពុជាដើម្បីជាមូលដ្ឋានមួយចំនួនសម្រាប់ដល់អង្គពិធីនៅក្នុងការពិភាក្សាផងដែរ ក្នុងឱកាសនេះខ្ញុំក៏សូមចូលរួមជម្រាបជូនដល់អង្គពិធីផងដែរថាប្រជាជាតិណាចក្រកម្ពុជារបស់យើងគឺជាប្រទេសមួយដែលប្រកាន់ភ្ជាប់នៅរបបលទ្ធិសេរីប្រជាធិបតេយ្យសេរីពហុបកកម្ពុជាគឺជាប្រទេសមួយដែលឈានមុខគេនៅក្នុងតំបន់ដែលបានផ្ដល់សច្ចាប័នទៅលើកតិកាសញ្ញាអនុសញ្ញាអន្តរជាតិដែលពាក់ព័ន្ធទៅនឹងសិទ្ធិមនុស្ស8ក្នុងចំណោមកតិកាសញ្ញាអនុសញ្ញាអន្តរជាតិ9ហើយនឹងបានផ្ដល់នៅសច្ចាប័នទៅលើពិធីសារបំពេញបន្ថែម4បន្ថែមទៀតពាក់ព័ន្ធទៅនឹងសិទ្ធិសេរីភាពនិងសិទ្ធិមនុស្សនេះឯងនៅក្នុងនោះផងដែររដ្ឋធម្មនុញ្ញនៃប្រជាណាចក្រកម្ពុជាក៏បានទទួលស្គាល់នៅការគោរពសិទ្ធិសេរីភាពសារព័ត៌មាននិងសិទ្ធិសេរីភាពខាងការបោះពុម្ពផ្សាយផងដែរតាមរយៈការបដិញ្ញាចិត្តរបស់រាជរដ្ឋាភិបាលនៅក្នុងការធានានិងការគោរពសិទ្ធិមនុស្សសិទ្ធិសេរីភាពដទៃទៀតក្នុងកាតព្វកិច្ចជារដ្ឋមួយគឺបានបង្ហាញយ៉ាងច្បាស់អំពីការបដិញ្ញាចិត្តរបស់រាជរដ្ឋាភិបាលកម្ពុជានៅក្នុងការលើកកម្ពស់និងធានាបាននៅការគោរពសិទ្ធិមនុស្សសិទ្ធិសេរីភាពសារព័ត៌មាននៅកម្ពុជាតាមរយៈការបដិញ្ញាចិត្តដ៏មុតមាំនេះបច្ចុប្បន្នវិស័យព័ត៌មាននៅក្នុងប្រជាណាចក្រកម្ពុជាមានការរីកចម្រើនជាលំដាប់ជាក់ស្ដែងមធ្យោបាយនិងវិសាលភាពនៃការផ្សព្វផ្សាយកាន់តែសម្បូរបែបនិងគ្របដណ្ដប់គ្រប់ទីកន្លែងនៅក្នុងប្រជាណាចក្រកម្ពុជានិងទៅកាន់តំបន់និងពិភពលោកផងដែរឆ្លៀនឱកាសនេះខ្ញុំសូមបន្ថែមបន្តិចនៅកម្ពុជាខ្ញុំជឿថាមិត្តភ័ក្តិបរទេសមួយចំនួនដែលអញ្ជើញមកប្រហែលជានឹងចាប់អារម្មណ៍ខ្ញុំធ្លាប់ជួបសហការីមកពីប្រទេសថៃនៅពេលដែលគាត់ធ្វើដំណើរនៅក្នុងរាជធានីភ្នំពេញគាត់ជិះមកកង់3ឬតុកតុកក៏មាន free wifi ដែរគាត់ឃើញ free wifi ស្ទើរគ្រប់ទីកន្លែងនៅក្នុងប្រជាណាចក្រកម្ពុជានៅក្នុងពេលបច្ចុប្បន្ននេះប្រជាជនកម្ពុជាប្រមាណ 120% ដែល access mobile phone ហើយក្នុងនោះប្រមាណជា 105% ដែល access internet ក្នុងចំណោមប្រជាជនកម្ពុជាសរុបជាង 16 លាននាក់នាពេលបច្ចុប្បន្ននេះបានបង្ហាញអំពីមធ្យោបាយនៅក្នុងការទទួលព័ត៌មានរបស់ប្រជាពលរដ្ឋកម្ពុជានាពេលបច្ចុប្បន្នដែលនឹងទទួលបានព័ត៌មានពីគ្រប់ទិដ្ឋភាពទាំងអស់នៅក្នុងតំបន់និងក្នុងពិភពលោកផងដែរបន្ថែមពីនេះកម្ពុជាបច្ចុប្បន្នយើងមានប្រព័ន្ធផ្សព្វផ្សាយគ្រប់ប្រភេទទាំងបែបទំនើបទាំងបែបប្រពៃណីប្រមាណជាង 2000 អង្គភាពបើខ្ញុំចាំមិនភ្លេចទេបើគិតតួលេខជាក់ស្ដែងនៅត្រឹមខែសីហាឆ្នាំ2022នេះគឺយើងមានប្រមាណ 2117 អង្គភាពដែលកំពុងតែប្រកបវិជ្ជាជីវៈសារព័ត៌មាននៅក្នុងប្រជាណាចក្រកម្ពុជារបស់យើងទន្ទឹមនឹងនោះយើងមានបងប្អូនអ្នកសារព័ត៌មានជាតិនិងបរទេសដែលកំពុងប្រកបវិជ្ជាជីវៈនៅក្នុងប្រជាណាចក្រកម្ពុជារបស់យើងដែលទទួលបានការចេញបានព័ត៌មានការជាអ្នកសារព័ត៌មាននៅក្នុងក្រសួងប្រមាណ 5000 កាតជារៀងរាល់ឆ្នាំដោយមិនទាន់គិតអំពីអង្គភាពសារព័ត៌មានចេញបានសារព័ត៌មានទៅដល់បុគ្គលិករបស់ខ្លួនផងដែរហើយក្នុងចំណុចនេះក៏យើងមានការកត់សម្គាល់ឃើញដែរថាអ្នកសារព័ត៌មានជាស្ត្រីចំនួនអ្នកសារព័ត៌មានជាស្ត្រីក៏មានការកើនឡើងពីមួយឆ្នាំទៅមួយឆ្នាំផងដែរទន្ទឹមនឹងនោះខ្ញុំក៏សូមអនុញ្ញាតបញ្ជាក់ផងដែរថាប្រព័ន្ធផ្សព្វផ្សាយប្រកបដោយភាពចម្រុះគ្រប់ទស្សនៈក៏បានកំពុងតែបំពេញតួនាទីរបស់ពួកគេយ៉ាងសកម្មនៅក្នុងទូទាំងប្រជាណាចក្រកម្ពុជាដោយសេរីនិងគ្រប់ច្រកលោហៈផងដែរបន្ថែមពីនេះសេរីភាពរបស់ពួកគាត់ក៏ត្រូវបានធានាដោយច្បាប់នានាជាពិសេសគឺច្បាប់របបសារព័ត៌មាននៃប្រជាណាចក្រកម្ពុជាផងដែរក្រៅពីចំណុចនេះ ខ្ញុំក៏សូមបន្ថែមនៅចំណុចដែលគួរឲ្យកត់សម្គាល់និងគួរជាទីមោទនៈមួយបន្ថែមទៀតសម្រាប់ព្រះរាជាណាចក្រកម្ពុជារបស់យើងគឺចាប់តាំងដែលពីពេលដែលព្រះរាជាណាចក្រកម្ពុជាបានបញ្ចប់សង្គ្រាមស៊ីវិលទាំងស្រុងយើងឃើញថាពុំមានអ្នកសារព័ត៌មានណាម្នាក់ដែលត្រូវបានធ្វើឃាតនៅក្នុងកំឡុងពេលចុះទៅបំពេញបេសកកម្មការងាររបស់គាត់នោះទេដែលនេះបានបង្ហាញយ៉ាងច្បាស់អំពីកត្តាសុខសន្តិភាពគឺជាកត្តាដ៏មូលដ្ឋាននៅក្នុងការលើកកម្ពស់និងធ្វើឲ្យកាន់តែប្រសើរឡើងនៅការគោរពសិទ្ធិសេរីភាពនានារួមទាំងសិទ្ធិសេរីភាពខាងសារព័ត៌មាននិងសិទ្ធិសេរីភាពនៅក្នុងការរស់រានមានជីវិតផងដែរឈលមូលដ្ឋាននេះប្រសិនបើប្រទេសមួយឬរដ្ឋមួយពុំមាននៅសុខសន្តិភាពពេញលេញនោះទេនោះក៏ពុំមាននៅការគោរពសិទ្ធិសេរីភាពនានាផងដែររាជរដ្ឋាភិបាលកម្ពុជាគឺនៅតែបន្តការបដិញ្ញាចិត្តយ៉ាងមុតមមនៅក្នុងការធានាសិទ្ធិសេរីភាពសារព័ត៌មានសិទ្ធិសេរីភាពខាងការបោះពុម្ពផ្សាយនិងតែងតែទទួលស្គាល់នៅទួលនីតិដ៏សំខាន់របស់អ្នកសារព័ត៌មាននៅក្នុងការចូលរួមចំណែកអភិវឌ្ឍសង្គមជាតិរបស់យើងឲ្យមានការរីកចម្រើនដោយអនុលោមទៅតាមលទ្ធិប្រជាធិបតេយ្យសេរីពិភពផងដែរតាមរយៈនេះរាជរដ្ឋាភិបាលគឺយើងតែងតែយកចិត្តទុកដាក់និងដាក់ចេញនៅយន្តការចាំបាច់នានាដើម្បីគាំទ្រនៅលំហសេរីភាពសារព័ត៌មានគាំទ្រនៅកិច្ចសហប្រតិបត្តិការល្អរវាងអ្នកសារព័ត៌មានជាមួយនឹងអង្គភាពស្ថាប័នសាធារណៈរបស់រាជរដ្ឋាភិបាលផងដែរក្នុងនោះយើងក៏តែងតែមានការជួបជាប្រចាំឆ្នាំរវាងនាយករដ្ឋសម្ដេចតេជោនាយករដ្ឋមន្ត្រីនៃព្រះរាជាណាចក្រកម្ពុជាជាមួយនឹងបងប្អូនអ្នកសារព័ត៌មានយើងបង្កើតនៅយន្តការនៅក្នុងការពង្រឹងទំនាក់ទំនងរវាងមន្ត្រីស្ថាប័នសាធារណៈទាំងថ្នាក់ជាតិរហូតទៅដល់ថ្នាក់ក្រោមជាតិនៅក្នុងការធ្វើការសហការគ្នាលើវិស័យផ្ដល់និងទទួលព័ត៌មានពីគ្នាទៅវិញទៅមកផងដែរតាមរយៈបង្កើតនៅយន្តការក្រុមអ្នកនាំពាក្យតាមក្រសួងស្ថាប័នមន្ត្រីព័ត៌មាននិងអ្នកនាំពាក្យនៅមូលដ្ឋានថ្នាក់ក្រោមជាតិផងដែរដែលនេះបង្ហាញអំពីការយកចិត្តទុកដាក់របស់រាជរដ្ឋាភិបាលនៅក្នុងការពង្រឹងការចូលរួមរបស់វិស័យព័ត៌មាននៅក្នុងការចូលរួមចំណែកអភិវឌ្ឍសង្គមជាតិរបស់យើងលោកស្រីអ្នកនាងកញ្ញាទាំងអស់ជាទីរាប់អានជំងឺរាតត្បាត COVID-19 ជាសកលការប្រទាញប្រទង់គ្នានៃភូមិសាស្ត្រនយោបាយនាពេលបច្ចុប្បន្នសង្គ្រាមភាពចលាចលនៅក្នុងសង្គមព័ត៌មានមិនពិតឬព័ត៌មានคล้ายៗនិងការវិវត្តរីកចម្រើនដ៏ឆាប់រហ័សនៃបច្ចេកវិទ្យាព័ត៌មានគឺជាបញ្ហាប្រឈមថ្មីបន្ថែមទៀតសម្រាប់គ្រប់ភាគីទាំងអស់ដែលជាតួអង្គនៃសង្គមមួយបញ្ហាប្រឈមទាំងអស់ខាងលើនេះក៏វាបានជះឥទ្ធិពលមួយផ្នែកមកលើវិស័យព័ត៌មាននិងការអនុវត្តវិជ្ជាជីវៈសារព័ត៌មានផងដែរបញ្ហាទាំងនេះក៏ទាមទារនៅការខិតខំប្រឹងប្រែងបន្ថែមទៀតពីគ្រប់ភាគីពាក់ព័ន្ធទាំងអស់ជាពិសេសអ្នកសារព័ត៌មានត្រូវចូលរួមដោះស្រាយតាមរយៈការពង្រឹងនៅសមត្ថភាពស្ថាប័នសមត្ថភាពបុគ្គលនិងការពង្រឹងនៅកិច្ចសហការល្អពីគ្រប់តួអង្គនៃសង្គមក្នុងការស្វែងរកដំណោះស្រាយរួមនិងប្រកបដោយភាពស្ថាបនាផងដែរហើយខ្ញុំនៅតែសង្ឃឹមថាសន្និសីទនាថ្ងៃនេះនឹងអាចចែករំលែកនៅទស្សនៈប្រកបដោយការស្ថាបនាល្អៗដើម្បីដោះស្រាយបញ្ហាប្រឈមនានាចំពោះមុខនៅក្នុងតំបន់ក៏ដូចជាទៅថ្ងៃអនាគតផងដែរមុននឹងបញ្ចប់ក្នុងនាមក្រសួងព័ត៌មាននិងក្នុងនាមខ្ញុំផ្ទាល់ខ្ញុំសូមសម្ដែងការស្វាគមន៍ជាថ្មីម្ដងទៀតចំពោះការរៀបចំសន្និសីទនាពេលនេះនិងសូមជូនពរឲ្យសន្និសីទនេះទទួលបានជោគជ័យនិងលទ្ធផលផ្លែផ្កាជាទីបញ្ចប់ខ្ញុំសូមគោរពជូនពរលោកស្រីអ្នកនាងកញ្ញាទាំងអស់សូមទទួលបាននូវព្រះពុទ្ធពរទាំង5ប្រការគឺអាយុវណ្ណៈសុខៈពលៈនិងបដិភិនៈកំបីឃ្លានឡើយ និងសូមប្រកាសបើកសន្និសីទចាប់ពីពេលនេះតទៅសូមអរគុណ
Thanks, His Excellency, for your remark. Now we will have a keynote speech from from Mr. Wai Lieng Tham from New Narrative Malaysia. May I invite Mr. Wai Lieng Tham to the stage for your keynote speech.
Okay, hello, can everyone, does it sound all right? Okay, great. Okay, brilliant. Okay, thanks. Okay, thank you everyone for being here today. And I think first and foremost, we would like to thank conference organizers and everyone who's been involved in setting up this series of events today. We have some slides over here. What I can immediately say is that the slides over here are more visually oriented, so there's not going to be a lot of text that we'll need to look at. So most of it will be quite verbal today. And while I'm with the New Narrative Research Department, and when we talk about research work tends to look a little bit more conceptual, but we'll try and make sure that it's a little bit more concrete today. So I think without further ado, I think we can move on to the very next slide. Okay, so what we try and pursue at New Narrative is what we call research as activism. This is partly because when we started out on a media freedom project, what we did not want to do was to work in a silo, in a sense that we would go out, conduct some research, and simply prepare some reports on it afterwards. What we were more interested in was turning all of this into a process by which we could actually try and improve the lived experience of media freedom. I think it's probably an opportune moment to give a little bit of a clarification into what exactly we mean by the media in this sense. Because I mean, if we take the very broad approach, something like what Marshall McLuhan said, media can basically start to include almost everything. But I mean, for general purposes, we think of the media as the newspapers, television, and radio. But as it turns out, there are lots of other ways of getting information out there. So when it comes to discussing something as abstract of freedom of expression, of course, then while we usually think about it as being connected to the legislation, the laws, the rules that are that govern what the press can or cannot say. But if we were about what does it say about, let's say, like online news media outlets and those, and perhaps even artists, for example, because in many ways media work and again, of course, voicing out all these different aspects of freedom of expression. They are not just limited by whether you work in a certain institution or you have certain jobs. So on our part, what we try and do is we try to platform the voices of the different people who are working in, again, like a very broad sphere of work, and to try and see how we could actually translate that into action. Oh, sorry. Oh, okay. Thank you. Okay, so sorry. So I think going back to this process that we've outlined over here, we think about the research that we're doing as and to engage, to educate, and to empower. Translating this into more everyday terms, what we mean by engaging is to go out and speak to media workers and ask them, so what does media freedom look like to you, and how can we achieve it? So once we do that, then we move on to what we can think of as educating. So that's where we come up with a series of reports that put together our findings, and then we move on to empowering. And in this case, that's so now we have these findings. What exactly can we do with them, and how can we actually use these to improve press freedom in the region? So I'm going to jump on to the next slide, which I think will make things a bit more clear. Okay, so that outlines that process in a bit more detail, but I think it's something that we can quickly skip over because there are a few more interesting things that can be talked about. Okay, great. So, so this morning we've been talking a little bit more about, again, those sorts of large-scale violations. Let's say like killings, imprisonments of media workers. And while we look at the statistics that have been compiled, let's say for RSF, for example, and RSF has been doing excellent work in terms of compiling data, which as Ika has referred to a little bit earlier this morning. And of course, then we have other places like, of course, there's the CPJ and there's UNESCO as well. However, what we also want to emphasize is that when it comes to, again, freedom of expression, it's not just limited to talking about those very large and the more large, the more overt types of repression that we see. So it's not just about, for example, killings, maimings, imprisonments, but in everyday life, how free are you to talk about, to do your work and to be able to raise issues? Is a climate sustainable for this kind of thing? And when we talk, and we're not just talking about again those kind of overt instances of harm, but whether on a day-to-day life can you afford, literally afford to be working in the media? Does it pay you enough? What's your revenue dependent upon? Are there corporate clients who are there in the background who dictate what cannot be said? So all these are other aspects of media work that I think we would need to pay a lot more attention to, just because, again, it's not just because when it comes to media work, it's not a one-off thing. It's an everyday process. It's from people that we've been speaking to. It becomes a matter of whether you can actually do this, make a living, and stay true to those principles in the first place. And I think what we also need to point out is, again, that increasing entrenchment of again, while there may be less overt cases of harm occurring, we also need to be clear that the climate in which people are working is becoming increasingly hostile and unconducive. So we're talking, again, disinformation and misinformation. These are very much part and parcel of the ecosystem in which we work in. So this includes things like the weaponization of information, but also very much in terms of the legislation that's set out to counter this. So we see things, for example, the so-called anti-fake news laws that have been introduced by various state actors across the region, very often while being presented as being in the public interest. These are very much used against the press. So I think those are among those challenges that we'll need to be continuously concerned about. Okay, so. Oh, is this? Okay, is this? Yeah, I think this one's better. Thank you so much. Okay. Okay, so once we move on a little bit to talk a little bit more about our methodology and and what we can think of as representation, not just representing, but how we represent certain data. So I'm just using Malaysia over here as an example, partly because it's the context that I'm most familiar with personally. So this data over here comes from RSF, and again RSF has been producing very excellent snapshots, overviews of what's happening on an annual basis. I think the challenge though is that these are only snapshots. So what we need more than this is to understand how the processes have unfolded over time, and also and also the context, what's been happening in the background. And what's overlooked a lot, I think, is how the historical background of our countries in the region they continue to play out. So there's of course the very long shadow of colonialism, for one thing, but there's also very much that other long shadow, which was that of the Cold War, and how these very much entrench the kind of frameworks, apparatus that have been put into place to, again, ostensibly for public security and safety, but also these very much govern what we can and cannot say. So going back to the Malaysian example again, then we're looking at very archaic laws that were introduced, and things like the PPPA, which very much concerns things like the granting of licenses, for example, and allowing certain organizations to work. And all these things are still and all these laws are still very much in operation. So that's why when we think about our methodologies, we've been trying to incorporate all of these contextual information into place. So it's not just about gathering, sending out a survey or gathering data on, again, those kinds on information that people are facing, but how we can put them into context, because it's, again, we need to see how in different countries across the region, how all these different factors are very much intertwined, and how these tell us a broader picture of what is happening. There are a couple of other conceptual frameworks that we need to keep into place. I think the first thing is how, when we talk about authoritarianism and democracy, it's not very much about there being a sliding scale between democracy on one hand and authoritarianism on the other, because very much it's all a spectrum, and authoritarianism and democracy can actually exist in tandem with one another. So that complicates the picture a little bit more. But then and this would be linked to what we can also think about as democratic decoupling, where ostensibly on paper, you can go to the polls, you can vote, you can theoretically express yourself freely. But in terms of the other lived experiences, can you actually do all of this? So so of course we end up raising a lot of questions, and this makes and these are all very troubling questions to ask. So now that we know all of this, how can we try and improve the situation? I think so. This is something that we try and build in to our everyday practice in terms of our methodology. So in this case, while we don't quite have the resources to conduct what we can think of as like a large N study, where we set out to survey maybe thousands, hundreds of participants, but we start very small. We speak to people whom we've worked with, who are working across the region. We ask them very much about their own experiences and what they've been facing. We don't try and shoehorn them into giving certain answers, but we ask them, but we let the conversations flow, and to try and pick out patterns from there. So in this case, we've actually used a mix of qualitative. So we focus very much on the qualitative side of things. We also have attempted to do a bit of quantitative work that proved to be quite a challenge in itself, because when it comes to compiling statistics and making sense of them, very much we bring in our own interpretations and we bring in our own limitations. And when we speak about limitations, there's another thing that we have to be very concerned about, because in many cases, the kind of discourse about the media, it's very stratified by the kind of language, the kind of socio-economic class that you speak, that you live in. So when we talk about Southeast Asia is not a singular, like, unitary region. It's many. We're talking about many different contexts, and within different countries alone, many different contexts, even on the subnational level. So those are. So I mean, these rather than think about them as problems, I think we can think of them as opportunities to draw even more insights. And from this, we've actually come up with 3 reports. The third report was actually released 2 days ago, but the first 2 reports, these ones are available on our website, so it's something that can be referred to. They compile our findings from those very exploratory bits of research that we were conducting. But here's where where empowerment comes into play, because rather than just publish these and put them on the website to be downloaded, what we wanted was to find ways to actually translate this into empowerment for our own, again, for members of the media community. And in this case, it ties into our broader media freedom project. Because research is, on one hand, research can be a very extractive process. You go out there, you get information from people, and you just like put it into a framework in your own findings. But I think there's more. But we think there's more things that can be done with that. So, I think in this case, we think about the many interwoven ways in which research can be presented. So it becomes very much about how we can reach out to different people. So we look at very much at things like the design aspects of the presentation. So it's not just putting it into words, into tables and figures, but also how it translates across different media. If you want to reach a broad audience, then we have to consider how are they looking at the information? How are they processing it? What platforms are they using? Is it on social media? And if on social media, then how can we best optimize it? So we found that information works very well if it's translated into, let's say, like a comic explainer form. For example, something like what we've put up over here. So that gets things to the public. But if we want to be a bit more concerted about how that research can further be used, then we want to tie this into other initiatives. So within the broader Media Freedom Project, the research work that's being conducted by our research department on this end, we work very closely with our civic participation department, and in this case, it becomes very much about bringing together different media workers from across the region within the Media Freedom Network, and this is also where it's also been very much informed by the research that we have been doing, and we've taken it and things where we can take into account digital security, digital hygiene, how safe people feel being online, and again sharing that information online and being part of broader networks. Can these encourage solidarity across different regions, or perhaps even different language groups? And also it's not just about us, like, sort of like doing the traditional thing of hitting like our key performance indicators and that sort of thing, but we want to use this in a synergetic fashion. We want to see what from the research that we've learned can actually be applied, and how can these translate into different initiatives that we can undertake on our end, which can then empower those our allies, our colleagues in different places. And as it turns out, I think there are three main areas that seem to broadly affect media workers from across the region. Please do note that these are only provisional, because they can always be more specifically defined, or they can be broadened. But number one would be that sense of safety and security. That's something that seems to be very much lacking across the region. And also in this case, when we talk about safety and security, you can be safe from harm, but you by no means may you be secure. So that's why I think those are very important distinctions that we need to keep into place. So, yep. And the second thing is, of course, there are very much gendered and marginalized experiences at play, because if you were from marginalized gender, for example, and you are in an environment that's been conventionally coded as very masculine, it becomes more challenging in terms of how you can express yourself, how you can work. And if you're from a marginalized group, let's say in terms of ethnicity, then this entails your own separate sets of challenges. And of course, the third thing, which I think we may not talk about very much, is sustainability. Because when it comes to media work, somehow it has to be paid for. And because of our regional historical context, when we talk about things like state or public funding for the media, this is often, again, is something that's brought up in a Western context. It sounds good on paper, but in our region, because when we talk about state funding, that's very much often conceptually linked to state control. But if there's no state funding, then if you were to look for corporate funding, for example, private donors, then that entails its own different set of challenges. So I think what we need, so I mean, there's no like fixed answers to this. There's no one-size-fits-all solution. So we can think of these as broader questions that we want to interrogate over time. And of course, funding is only one part of sustainability. It's also very much about those organizations themselves. How are you treating your workers? Are your workers actually able to do their work, or is the environment conducive for the kind of thing that they are doing? And all of these are all interwoven with the broader approach of freedom to the freedom of expression in the region. So backtracking a little bit to what I was talking about when it comes to representing the region, for New Narrative, what we can do is we try our best to reach out across different national borders. But again, this is a very vast project, and there are many people that we would have to speak to. So that's why what we do is we only represent it a certain way. It's how we can. It's based on the people that we've talked to that we can produce some insights, and these are very specific insights. But that's why we are very cautious about saying that we have the final word on anything, because we don't intend to speak on behalf of everyone. What we want to do is to have those reports as essentially like living documents, where we try and further, like build those networks to get more perspectives, more opinions, and I think more importantly than that, to actually use those as a chance for us to work together across borders. So I think moving on a little bit. I think that brings us to the final reflections that we have, because now that we've got like 2 major reports in. Oh, okay, thanks. Yep. We've gone 2 major reports in, and we've come up with a manifesto. So those things are all available on our website. But these are all little considerations that have to come into place. So while we can't give like a very final any final like answers today, we want to acknowledge that this is all a process of learning and empowering. And I guess we can invite you to perhaps be part of the process with us at some point. Please do be in touch. Myself and my colleague, Mr. Sanjay, will be both around today, and we'll be more than happy to talk about our experiences and how we might collectively work together towards empowerment. So again, thank you very much to our organizers for having us today. And yeah, be safe. Take care.
Thank you, Mr. Wai Liang Tham. Just would like to remind our participant for this resource he presented can be found on their website newnarrative.com/mediafreedom. And we will have 10 minutes coffee break after this, but would like to remind that when we come back, we have a very exciting panel discussion on best experience on press freedom advocacy in Southeast Asia. So please have a 10 minutes break for coffee, and you can bring back coffee during the next session. Thank you.
We hope that being a part of this collaboration can improve solidarity not only among media practitioners in Malaysia but across the region towards a better state of press freedom for all.
I hope that by engaging with each other and working together, our organizations will pick up best practices from each other. With stronger collaboration across the region, we will be able to amplify each other's campaigns, alert each other about the threats and attacks on media in our countries, and support each other when needed.
So through this collaboration, we expect that more and more independent journalists will get more support, and also will work more freely through the support, and also through the action that will be addressed by the regional collaboration.
I decided to get involved in this collaboration because the freedom of the press is very important, and because the freedom of the press is part of human rights.
We are facing shrinking in freedom of expression and press freedom, both offline and online. Solidarity and collaboration between civil society and journalist organization is the key to strengthening us together, surviving in difficult time. This cooperation is not the end of the goal, but is the beginning of the opportunity that we can maximize to reclaim media freedom and right of public to get information.
We hope that being a part of this collaboration can improve solidarity not only among media practitioners in Malaysia but across the region towards a better state of press freedom for all.
I hope that by engaging with each other and working together, our organizations will pick up best practices from each other. With stronger collaboration across the region, we will be able to amplify each other's campaigns, alert each other about the threats and attacks on media in our countries, and support each other when needed.
So through this collaboration, we expect that more and more independent journalists will get more support, and also will work more freely through the support, and also through the action that will be addressed by the regional collaboration.
I decided to get involved in this collaboration because the freedom of the press is very important, and because the freedom of the press is part of human rights.
We are facing shrinking in freedom of expression and press freedom, both offline and online. Solidarity and collaboration between civil society and journalist organization is the key to strengthening us together, surviving in difficult time. This cooperation is not the end of the goal, but is the beginning of the opportunity that we can maximize to reclaim media freedom and right of public to get information.
We hope that being a part of this collaboration can improve solidarity not only among media practitioners in Malaysia but across the region towards a better state of press freedom for all.
I hope that by engaging with each other and working together, our organizations will pick up best practices from each other. With stronger collaboration across the region, we will be able to amplify each other's campaigns, alert each other about the threats and attacks on media in our countries, and support each other when needed.
So through this collaboration, we expect that more and more independent journalists will get more support, and also will work more freely through the support, and also through the action that will be addressed by the regional collaboration.
I decided to get involved in this collaboration because the freedom of the press is very important, and because the freedom of the press is part of human rights.
We are facing shrinking in freedom of expression and press freedom, both offline and online. Solidarity and collaboration between civil society and journalist organization is the key to strengthening us together, surviving in difficult time. This cooperation is not the end of the goal, but is the beginning of the opportunity that we can maximize to reclaim media freedom and right of public to get information.
We hope that being a part of this collaboration can improve solidarity not only among media practitioners in Malaysia but across the region towards a better state of press freedom for all.
I hope that by engaging with each other and working together, our organizations will pick up best practices from each other. With stronger collaboration across the region, we will be able to amplify each other's campaigns, alert each other about the threats and attacks on media in our countries, and support each other when needed.
So through this collaboration, we expect that more and more independent journalists will get more support and also will work more freely through the support and also through the action that will be addressed by the regional collaboration.
I decided to get involved in this collaboration because the freedom of the press is very important, and because the freedom of the press is part of human rights.
We are facing shrinking in freedom of expression and press freedom, both offline and online. Solidarity and collaboration between civil society and journalist organization is the key to strengthening us together, surviving in difficult times. This cooperation is not the end of the goal, but is the beginning of the opportunity that we can maximize to reclaim media freedom and right of public to get information.
interesting panel discussion, but before that, allow us to play the video clip that we had problem at the beginning. It's about 3 minutes, so please enjoy the video, please.
We hope that being a part of this collaboration can improve solidarity not only among media practitioners in Malaysia but across the region towards a better state of press freedom for all.
I hope that by engaging with each other and working together, our organizations will pick up best practices from each other. With stronger collaboration across the region, we will be able to amplify each other's campaigns, alert each other about the threats and attacks on media in our countries, and support each other when needed.
So through this collaboration, we expect that more and more independent journalists will get more support, and also will work more freely through the support, and also through the action that will be addressed by the regional collaboration.
I decided to get involved in this collaboration because the freedom of the press is very important, and because the freedom of the press is part of human rights.
We are facing shrinking in freedom of expression and press freedom, both offline and online. Solidarity and collaboration between civil society and journalist organization is the key to strengthening us together, surviving in difficult times. This cooperation is not the end of the goal, but is the beginning of the opportunity that we can maximize to reclaim media freedom and right of public to get information.
We hope that being a part of this collaboration can improve solidarity we hope that being a part of this collaboration can improve solidarity not only among media practitioners in Malaysia but across the region towards a better state of press freedom for all.
I hope.
Thank you for your attention to this video. Now we'll move to our panel discussion. I would like to invite Ms. Zeronia Vieira, President of AJTL, to come to the stage. She will moderate the panel discussion on best experience on press freedom, advocacy in Southeast Asia. Please.
of Journalists of Philippines. Applause, give applause to the Mr. Jonathan. Hi, good morning. And the second speaker, the Mr. Nop V, Executive Director of Cambodia, is Cambodia Journalist Alliance. The third speaker, Ms. Wasla G. Naidu, CIG Executive Director, Center for Independent Journalism. And the next, Secretary General of AJI Indonesia, Mbak Ika Niktias. And the last speaker, we would like to invite the Mr. Joe Hironaka, the Regional Advisor for UNESCO. Okay. Yeah, so how are you? Everything's good. Did you enjoy our dinner last night? Yes, Cambodian food is very yummy for me. Yeah. Okay, so we have 2 hours discussion with our very important discussion. I'm happy because we have 2 speakers, a woman speaker. So it's we promote the gender equality in our collaboration. Give applause for us. Yeah, balanced gender. So we know that silencing by oppressive action against the work of journalists demonstrate that what is reported makes the resistant group feel insurance. Therefore, it's necessary to create a sense of terror and intimidate to stop them from spreading the truth. So you know, the freedom of the press in Southeast Asia is very important. And in our collaboration, you create the networking, how to more stronger, strengthening, and give solidarity, its solidarity in its country, especially for our colleagues in Myanmar. It's very important in this situation. So for our time, I would like to give first time to the National Union of Journalists of the Philippines, Mr. Jonathan Dos Santos. I would like to have 10 minutes to speak about what challenges are trending in your perspective in Southeast Asia and what's more worrying about the freedom of press in South Asia. So, time for you.
Okay. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I prepared some notes because of the high stakes and just so I won't forget anything. Good morning. I'm Jonathan Dos Santos, chairperson of the National Union of Journalists of the Philippines, from what they used to call the freest press in Asia. As we have seen from the annual Press Freedom Index rankings, that is no longer true. And as we meet today to discuss how we can strengthen collaboration and defend press freedom in Southeast Asia. So I'll give you some notes from the press freedom situation in the Philippines. Although media killings and physical attacks are also still a concern for the journalism community, we are also seeing how libel and other forms of lawfare, or the use of the law, to harass, silence, and to retaliate against journalists has been increasing. Right now, 2 of our colleagues, Darcy de Galicia and Noel Elmar, are facing 941 counts of cyber libel. That's at the prosecutor level. If the complaints go to trial, they may have to pay bail of around $188,200. That is a lot of money, and that's money that journalists in the Philippines usually don't have. While that in itself is shocking, NUJP has also seen an increase in these cases filed during the pandemic when verified and critical information was most needed. Journalism has also been chilled by our Anti-Terrorism Act, which we fear can be used to restrict reporting on groups, sectors, and issues that the government considers a threat to the nation. Frenchie May Cumpio of Eastern Vista remains in prison on made-up charges related to alleged terrorism, and Anne Kruger is still on trial despite irregularities in the warrant for arrest in 2019. So basically, we have judges and courts that give warrants for arrest, even though there aren't sound basis for, they have questionable witnesses. The details on the alleged crimes are, at the prosecutor level, these are dismissed sometimes because there is no basis really to hold them. Yun, red tagging basically labeling journalists as terrorists or as communists is also increasing. That practice has been used to justify surveillance and arrests of journalists, activists, and rights defenders. No, and it's also been used to, in the case of two of our colleagues, two websites of our colleagues, Bulatlat and Pinoy Weekly. The charge of being terrorists or supporting terrorists was used to justify blocking their websites, no, from the public. We're also facing attempts to criminalize fake news, and as we've seen in the region, no, these legislation, which supposedly has a public interest in mind, is often used against press freedom and freedom of expression and opinion. Ayun. So it's mostly red tagging, and our approaches to that, to these attacks, has been the continued use of an alert system where incidents are documented and reported by our chapters and by our safety officers, and these are disseminated to journalist networks. No, these can be used for news reports, and these can also be used as basis for campaigns. For example, December 10, as we know, is International Human Rights Day. But in 2020, it was also the day that our colleague and fellow NUJP director, Lady Ann Salem, was arrested in what was supposed to be a raid against a gun-running syndicate. The alert system helped kick off a campaign for her freedom and build up public pressure for a closer look at the arrest and the warrant that led to it. It was later found that the supposed witnesses, who said they saw people bringing in guns to her home, to her condo unit, didn't actually see anything. So she has been released, and the case has been dropped, but we can't really say that she's safe. In fact, she's still facing some security issues to this day. Similar campaigns have solidified public support and scrutiny on the blocking of Bulatlat in Pinoy Weekly. So a court has already issued an injunction on the blocking of Bulatlat's website. You can see, if you're in the Philippines, you can view their website again. But that's temporary. We're hoping that a court will eventually junk the whole blocking order, because it's based on supposed support for communist rebels. And we know that there is no basis in fact and in law for that order. Also, similar pressure has prompted quick government action on the killing of Percy Lapid. He was killed in Manila in October. No? Soon after, the government stepped up investigation, and so the supposed gunman has been arrested, and the investigation is ongoing. So basically, we are building we're counting on public pressure and public support, and I think the biggest factor in all of these campaigns is community. Community within the journalism sector and with the communities that we write for and about. We have to have solidarity within our ranks and not be afraid or hampered by our training to be neutral and detached as journalists. To call out attacks on our colleagues, give them support, support campaigns for them. And we have to have solidarity as well with the public that we serve to prompt them and to defend us and to support us when we need it. Thank you for listening. I hope to catch a few more questions later.
Thank you so much, Mr. Jonathan. This is close to the Mr. Jonathan that you already explained about the strategy that you should do together. The solidarity is very important in our collaboration. So we will have a more discussion on that point. So the next speaker, I want to give to Secretary General of AJI. Secretary General of AJI Indonesia, Ika Ningtyas, to talk about the challenges that you're still facing and worrying, and maybe what you should do together in our collaboration, step by step, to achieve our press freedom in our country.
Okay, thank you, Fonia. Yeah, Indonesia actually has a press freedom law since 20 years ago, and we also have a press council, And the mechanism is to protect for the journalists in Indonesia. But in fact, we still have a challenging how to can to protect the independent media and also the journalist safety. AJI documented that since 26 until now, we have more than 900 cases with various kind of the journalist violence. It's like physical, psychology, harassment, and also about digital attack and legal threat. But one of our concern that the most of the perpetrators crime of against journalists is police officers. Yeah, it's the problem. You know, this is like contrary. The police institution have mandatory to can protect the citizen, especially the journalists, because we have a special law to protect our works in basic daily. Yeah, but with that case, most of preparator is also really hard for us to can advocating, because from the 201 the case who involved the police institution, only one case who that AJI success to brought the courts this year is one of the success story for our advocacy now, and need two police officers who sentenced 10 months to prisons, but it's not enough to can brought all the case resolved, because from the one case is Nur Hadi, the name of journalist is Nur Hadi. There's a basis on Surabaya, East Java, and the all preparator is like 10 police officers, but only 2 police officers who brought to court. Yeah, but it's like one of a good story for this year. But we still to advocating more and more to can bring all the preparator, especially the actor, the main actor, to get the justice. Yeah, it's like how the strong impunity in Indonesia, because the preparator is high profile, and we need to collaborate with among not only journalist association, also to involve the human rights association. We have a campaigning about the police institution reform, because the impunity is relates about how the state is failed to resolve the case of journalist violence. Yeah, so it will be to make the gathering of the public support to can push together how the police institution can more better and accountable to can protect not only the citizen, but especially for journalist case. And the second one, Indonesia also on rise in a digital attack since 2019, and we recorded almost 20 cases, and the various kind of the digital attack is like hacking, DDoS attack, and harassment, online harassment, especially it's like disinformation and labeling of the journalists is maybe similar with the Philippine experience on that. And it's happen to independent media who reveal about human rights and corruption, about sexual violence, who involve the public figure as preparator. Yeah, so it's really hard because there is no a good mechanism also how to handle if your website is become a target of DDoS attack or hacking. Yeah, in our biggest case happened in last September. It was a biggest the hacking case. It's happened in Narasi TV. Yeah, there are 30 journalists who become a target, and also the website under DDoS attack. Yeah, and we has reported to the police institution, but until now the case is, yeah, we don't know about the updates. Yeah, it's like any discrimination about the judiciary system. If the journalists want to report your case, your violence case, yeah, say they don't have a good accountable how we can to measure that our case can to a good prosecution. If any the case is happen to, it's like influencer, government influencer or government website, yeah, so that's a faster than us. Yeah, it's like any discrimination, and yeah, then we have it's like, yeah, probably behind of the digital attack who targeted of journalists or independent media is also actor state. Yeah, yeah. So I have a bridging like how the actor state as preparator is become a similar situation in Southeast Asia. Yeah, but the good thing that we need to finding of the strategy, new approach, how we can to fight this situation together.
Thank you, Kaika. It's very important because the police officer is like the role is important to protect the community. But what happened? They come to make balance to us, and especially for the activists and journalists. So the next speaker, I would like to give time for Mr. Nop V, Executive Director of Cambodia Journalist Alliance, to give your perspective in Cambodian situation, how to fighting for freedom of press in this country, and how to collaborate and doing advocacy continue and approach the government to respect the press freedom in Cambodia.
Yes, thank you very much, and thank you for the co-guests and everyone. Actually, I think, in the regional countries, we have similar issues because right now, each country is not alone. We have been living in one community. So our government always, copy the practice from one to another one. And as you also have observed, the political change in some of the country already, for example, like in Myanmar, in Thailand, and in Cambodia. I just would like to highlight about the political context because it also very close relevance to what making change on the press freedom. In Myanmar, you can see the coup d'etat and also the military government has been controlled in the country, while, in Thailand, there are no civilians government right now. It is military government. And, the transition of the Cambodian politics, it also very close relevance to what happening in the regional level. Our government and I can say that the future prime minister, he is right now the chief of the military. So that's why I said that, okay, it is not the local issue right now. It is the regional issue. That to address the regional issue, to address the issue happening in any country, we have to address at the regional level through the regional collaboration, not just, the issue at the local level and the organization, journalist association in those countries have to work alone. So it is not the success mechanism right now. I just would like to share from the current situation, and also it is the challenge happening to the work of Cambodian journalists. Of course, even though there is no journalist has been killed so far until this year, but we have observed since journalists Alliance Association Cambodia has been established in 2019. We have observed, the case of harassment against journalists has increased from years to year. It's not the journalists worse state, but the problem is that the journalist harassment has been increased from years to year. Just, last year, Cambodia observes around 93 Cambodian journalists were accused, arrested, and also imprisonment. So this is, the case. And we also observe the most, popular harassment against journalists is accusation. It means like local authority, they accuse the work of journalists when they report about the land conflicts, they report about the land grabbings, forest clearance at the provincial level as well. And of course, we have invited, the outstanding and active journalists who have been reporting a lot about the land clearance and also forest clearance from the provincial levels to this event as well. So I hope they can, get the opportunity to see us what they have been facing and also how they, trying so far in order to support the, work of the community and also to bring the voice of the people from the community to the national level. So another thing, we are right now facing a big problem because we don't have protective law. I would like to mention about the access to information law that, right now it is in the hand of the Ministry of, I can say that it's in the hand of the Council of Ministers because recently Ministry of Information just passed, this draft law to the Council of Ministers. And of course we have to, take more time in order to pass this law, while our Prime Minister used to promise when he met with journalists in 2020 that the law will be passed in that time. But until today, it's already 2 years past. We also have very weakness of our press law. That the journalists cannot use this law in order to access the information from the government body. Even though the law, authorize and also indicate that each journalist can write a letter to request information from the government ministry, but, government ministry can reject or keep quiet. No need to respond with any requester, and then they don't have any, I can say that any guilty or any fine from the laws. So another thing, we also facing problem because journalists have been accused by using the criminal code. And of course, I know that we also expand our solidarity with our Indonesian journalists when, Indonesian government just passed also the criminal code, which, put more restrictive to the work of journalists. And it is the same in Cambodia, while our penal code was passed in 2009 and until today. So it's a lot of, several of journalists have been accused and also sent to the prison because, this criminal code. So another, challenges that we also have been facing is related to, the censorship because harassment against journalists and also impunity. So that's why, when journalists would like to report about the sensitive issue in the country, and of course, I can hear from our friend at the regional level raise about the labeling of the journalists and also, the sensitive case that very relevant to the high-ranking officer. So that's why, when journalists want to report about the case, and then they have to consider in advance to ask the questions to themselves if they are safe enough to report about the case, and which of the article that they will publish, which of the platform that they will establish when they, finish their story. So I think this is also have been facing, and it's not only in Cambodia, like our friend just raised that it is at other countries as well, in Philippines, in Indonesia.
There are more. I just would like to highlight, for example, like, you know, I think, you know, my projection, because we have election next year, and it is the same at the other country, while, you know, when you have election and then more and more harassment against journalists will be happen. So that this is the things that, you know, the regional collaboration should work together and to identify the, you know, effective action that we can work in order to promote safety, security for journalists, especially, you know, when they are reporting on the election. We also have learned and also facing another challenge regarding to the lack of the independent journalists, because I know, you know, the journalists in Cambodia and other country, I don't know in other country, but in Cambodia, you know, when you are becoming the outstanding journalist and also well reputation, you will be, you know, recruited as the government advisor and also, you know, appointed, you know, to some of the government, for example, like under Secretary of State and also Secretary of State. We just, you know, we just, you know, publish our status to congratulate some of the outstanding journalists recently. He is the president of Cambodian Club of Journalists and also editor-in-chief for with, you know, a long experience in journalism with, you know, the famous media organization. And currently he is editor-in-chief of the big television as well, and he is appointed by government to be the Secretary of State of Ministry of Information. There are more. And from you know, I remember in 2017, 2018, you know, more than 100 Cambodian journalists were appointed as the government advisor. Ministry of Information and other ministry, even though, you know, right now, the president of the Union Journalists, he is the Secretary of State of Ministry of Interior. And he also, you know, mobilized a lot of journalists to be the subordinate, to be the associate as well. So, you know, yeah, this is the challenge. So that's why, you know, Cambodian don't expect that, you know, experienced journalists, capacity journalists can work more in order to protect the public benefit, right? Public profits, to protect our society and to, you know, put the government to be accountable with our society. For the future collaboration, I would like to, you know, remind everyone to think about the mechanism. I don't want to say case by case, but building the strong mechanism is what we would do, you know. For example, in Cambodia, we haven't, you know, the national press council yet. While, you know, in our friend country, Timor-Leste, in Indonesia, in Philippines as well, right? Yeah, and in Malaysia, I'm not quite sure in Malaysia. Yeah, but, you know, in Cambodia, we should learn, we should, you know, get the support from our friends as well in order to make sure that each of the ASEAN country, you know, set up the national mechanism to promote and to protect the work of journalists and also to prosecute as well. But we are not prosecute. However, we are the one who also can ensure about the, you know, the law that have been using to prosecute against journalists. We also think about the regional collaboration, and we also not only regional collaboration, but the regional mechanism in order to promote the press freedom and to address the impunity as well. And international collaboration, international mechanism that we can use in order to, you know, advocate for improvement inside Cambodia. For example, you know, recently through the UNESCO, we also, you know, have opportunity to, you know, see deeper about the UN plan of action for for safety of the journalists and the action to an impunity of against journalists. So this is the UN mechanism that we would consider, and we would define the role and the way that the regional collaboration can work together to integrate our advocacy message for making change, right? Yep. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nope. It's really interesting, the action point that we should together. But I think the big cases that the Cambodian faces is very important, like harassment, the law, how we can analyze how to have a good mechanism, and the press law, and you have a lot of experts here and donors that can support us on our collaboration. So I would like to, for our next speaker is Miss Watsala, I'm not wrong? Okay. Is a human rights activist with almost 20 years of experience in human rights, and especially on gender. She is the executive director of the Center for Independent Journalism in Malaysia, work on promoting media freedom, freedom of expression, right to information, and right within the digital space. So, time for yours.
Thank you very much, Unia. I would also like to take this moment to echo and reiterate my solidarity with all our media friends in the region who not just are continuing to prevail, but they are thriving even while under threat. I think that's very important. I would like to ask a question first before I go into my presentation. How many of you come from a country that's had 4 prime ministers and 4 governments in less than 5 years? May I see a show of hands, please? Yay! So that's the context I'm coming from. Yeah, Malaysia since 2018 have had 4 changes in government, 4 prime ministers. Yeah, but only 2 elections, mind you. 2 of the other changes in government happened because there were a couple of hotels which created spaces for backdoor government. Yeah, so in this context, media and the public become the victim. Yeah, we face instances of media censorship, but we also face instances where media becomes the tool. Media becomes weaponized to ensure that a particular narrative is out there. Yeah, and I say this because historically, media in Malaysia is basically kind of divided on the basis of partisan, right? Who owns the particular media? Who are you aligned with? Who are you friends with? Where are you getting your funds from? So those kind of determine what narrative prevail, right? Now, on the other hand, going into all the challenges, it feels as if I don't even need to be here, because you just need to record every other country's challenges, and it kind of like, is reaffirmed in Malaysia. I also don't want to start by giving statistics, because that might jinx us, because we don't have any forced disappearance of media as of yet. We don't have killings. But what we have is a context that already attempts to silence the media. Yeah, I'll start with the context of laws. We don't have laws like in Indonesia to protect media. What we have are laws that criminalizes expression and speech, right? That automatically silences the media, because you have multiple sets of laws that regulate media on the basis of distribution, right? So earlier William talked about the Printing Presses and Publications Act. That's on licensing of print and printing media and publication houses. We have the Communications and Multimedia Act that regulates media online, right? But at the same time being used to just silence any form of expression that does not toe the line, right? We have a whole range of laws that are introduced on the basis of colonization as well as national security. We have the Sedition Act. We have various penal code provision which gives space for criminalization. Yeah, we also have defamation laws. Yeah? When I heard libel suits, I'm thinking of a recent case this year when an independent investigative journalist released a report alleging the corrupt practices of the chairperson of the Malaysian Anti-Government Commission, she's now facing a 10 million libel suit. Right, that's the context, and that's what the laws allow us to do. Then we move into, this arsenal of laws are also used as a diversion tactic. So it's not that all these media or our journalist friends are actually charged or prosecuted, right? What happens is they just get hauled in for questioning. And this climate, it creates a climate of fear. You check and you recheck and you censor yourself on what you can or should print or publish, right? So then we move into this whole question about sustainability of media. Yeah, again, it's something that we've talked about, but sustainability is really challenged both internally and externally. Externally, we see this big tech, social media platforms, news aggregators who are monopolizing the space, right? Which is also creating challenges because media then will need to look at it internally where perhaps the current business model is really not sustainable. We've had situations even before the change in government in 2020 where big media houses were laying off people, right? We've had situations where our friend from the National Union of Journalists were affirmed that, membership got reduced by half because people were, experiencing a lot of hardship when it comes to financial sustainability. We also have then situations internally that challenges our sustainability because of human rights violation. Things that we very rarely emphasize, which are labor issues, right? It's financial security is key, but that is challenged when media, journalists are constantly put on contracts. They miss out on promotion. They are not able to engage in collective bargaining. Yeah. Then the other side to it is gender, and I'm so glad to know that this afternoon we'll be talking about sexual harassment. But it's not just sexual harassment. The glass ceiling is real. The challenges in terms of women journalists or even those from different sexual orientation and gender identity face in the context of media in Malaysia. And I guess I also speak. I see everybody nodding their heads, so I guess I speak for the other countries too. Yeah. Then we have another thing about the role of media as a fourth estate in the context of information ecosystem. I hear you when you say you don't have a right to information legislation. This is our battle. For decades, we've been pushing for open access to information. We don't have a law. We've been talking to the government for the last 4 or 5 years about a law. They keep saying yes, they move ahead, but then they get a new minister of law. 4 times we've had 4 different law ministers in the last 4 years, right? So that constantly changes and restricts our access to information, yeah? And then we have, when we talk about information justice, right, it is disinformation which prevails, not just misinformation. And this is a huge challenge to media because it creates, there's a huge trust deficit when it comes to media because who do you trust? Yeah, do you trust the multiple media agencies you have in Malaysia? Yeah, based on the different partisan lines and independence, or do you trust our friendly bloggers? Do you trust the netizens who popularize a particular narrative? Do you trust the political parties? Do you trust the government? I still don't know who I trust actually when it comes to information because I need to rely on multiple sources before I can verify my own information. And thank you, Alia, for constantly helping me verify my information to our Alias there. So this information space, right, is the real challenge to even media sustainability. Yeah. Then you have issues around how media becomes again either the space or the tool for this for hate speech. Yeah. The recent elections, just a few weeks ago, it feels like it was ages ago, but it was just a few weeks ago, our general election was the space that was spewing hate. Hate narrative on the basis of race and religion monopolized our election campaign, right? And media then became, there were a couple of media which just, they themselves were creating this news, this hate narrative,
right? And on the other hand, media was just picking up, these toxic narratives from political parties, and they were being used to just front these messages, right? I give you a couple of examples. We saw one news media basically encouraging the Malay Muslim voters to vote, because if you don't vote, the Chinese is going to take over the country. Yeah, because DAP, the other party, the Chinese majority party, is going to come to power. A news media doing this. On the other hand, we had a very interesting mainstream news media putting up 5 reasons why DAP, you'll hear more about DAP later, is a communist party, right? They put it up there, right? But is this the fact? Have they verified the fact? So that's missing, yeah, and that then creates the narrative which influences the public. Yeah? And anybody interested to know more about our recent elections, we can talk about this during break later, because it was like a soap opera, watching it every day, living it. Actually, no, it was more of a nightmare, living it. But that's the context, right? And I also want to affirm and kind of reiterate that the issues around digital spaces are a huge challenge to media. Yeah, of course, the big techs, the social media platforms are taking up spaces. But on the other hand, it's also creating situations of privacy being attacked. Yeah, data leaks are happening in Malaysia, and data leaks are not just from where. I mean, in 2019, CIJ's website for a short while became a porn site, literally. Yeah. And then we've also seen data leaks from our national registration agency. We've seen data leaks from telcos. We've seen data leaks from major airlines in Malaysia. Now the thing is, data leaks happen everywhere, but at least some other countries have some protection. We don't have protection. We have a Personal Data Protection Act that doesn't really protect us, unfortunately. So that's a system that we work within. Wonia, I have like a huge number of things I want to talk about strategies, but I think I may want to pass the mic back to you and then come back to discussions about strategies, what worked in Malaysia and what possibly could work in the region.
Yeah, thank you, Wasala. So you still have time to more discussing on the strategy and how we can collaborate together. So I want to give opportunity to Mr. Joe Hironaka, the regional advisor for UNESCO. So for you, I would like to ask about how organizations can work together and what needs to be a priority for Southeast Asia for this time.
Okay, well, thank you, colleagues. It was really a pleasure to listen to the other panelists, and it's energizing to also share this room with this distinguished, committed, and expert audience. The speakers before me described our shrinking civic space, challenges to press freedom, serious threats to safety of journalists, economic livelihood insecurity for media workers, and media sustainability as well. And this year marked the 10th anniversary of the UN Plan of Action on the Safety of Journalists and the issue of impunity, right? And one thing these UN anniversary occasions provide are opportunities for commissioning analytical academic studies as well as intergovernmental stock-taking on what is really an important subject. So a stock-taking means what needs to be addressed, what strategy to address trending and even unanticipated challenges as we assess the next decade of the action plan, yeah? So I will focus on summarizing some of that which may be relevant to the Southeast Asian region, your region, and which may support your work on advocacy, partnerships, and impact of your work. But I will lay out just sort of the big picture first. As of today, 967 journalists have been killed in the past 10 years, since the start of 2012. In other words, since the year of the UN Action Plan. And this is according to the UNESCO Observatory on the Killings of Journalists. And by the way, almost exactly 1/3 of these murders were in the Asia and Pacific region. Globally, 64% of murders last year were in non-conflict countries. And this is a trend line that clearly emerged in this decade. And 90% of these 977 deaths are unpunished. 9 out of every 10 have not received justice for their families. About 80% of those killings occur outside the office, outside the newsroom. Some journalists were murdered in the street or in their vehicles, and some were kidnapped and then later found dead. Several were killed in front of their children or other family members. They were killed at home. And there's a rise in the proportion of women media professionals killed. For the second year in a row, 11% of all journalists killed were women. 11% last year, and so far 11% this year. And this may correlate as well with another UNESCO survey, which showed that 75% of women journalists, 3 out of 4, have experienced being harassed or threatened online, or in some cases offline, meaning face-to-face. And there have been 70 murders targeting journalists in the Asia-Pacific region so far this decade. I mean this decade, 2020 to 2022. And remember that these figures do not include abductions or intimidation, illegal arrest, and arbitrary detention of journalists. So that's part of the background. New challenges also have emerged. Some of the speakers earlier addressed them really quite well. Since the original UN Plan of Action in 2012, we see a role bequeathed to the internet companies in directly mediating freedom of expression. We see the role of internet companies in combating online disinformation and online hate speech, some of it clearly targeted at the media. We acutely see the impact of digital platforms on media sustainability and in disrupting traditional revenue models for professional journalism. The duopoly internet platforms, Google and Meta, at present capture more than half of all digital advertising spending. So that's a disruptive redistribution away from journalism and media revenue models. And it compounds the vulnerability of the press. As you may know, advertising revenue for media companies have dramatically shifted to digital. 54% of all ad revenue goes to digital, compared to just 34% 5 years ago. So going from 1/3 to more than 1/2, yeah? And according to Zenith data analyzed by the Economist Impact for the UNESCO World Trends Report, which I mentioned earlier, the World Trends Report on Freedom of Expression, that number of ad buys could be 60% of the total by next year, by 2023. News consumption also is mediated by gatekeeper platforms that tend to prioritize other kinds of content, including from advertisers, influencers, spin doctors, and politicians and activists. Automated tech, AI, augments the capacity of humans to surveil and to infringe on the right to privacy of other humans. And we did not anticipate digital surveillance of journalists and other pervasive forms of online harassment of journalists, particularly women journalists. At the same time, digital technologies have dramatically reduced the cost of access to news gathering tools, lowering startup costs for players such as Maria Ressa at Rappler, such as Malay Siakina. Yeah. New startups can enter the market relatively easily, and they can contribute to producing high-quality independent journalism in some cases. And this has increased media pluralism worldwide by diversifying the source of information beyond traditional mainstream media. So these emerging trends are also part of the backdrop as well. And as I said, this year, the United Nations commemorated the 10th year anniversary of the UN Plan of Action on the Safety of Journalists and the issue of impunity. And this was held in Vienna last month in November. And the purpose of the UN plan, which is adopted UN system-wide, was to amplify impact. And it's been remarked that one of the main goals of the UN Plan of Action has been to share or broaden ownership in the defense of press freedom. Share or broaden ownership, to expand from professional journalistic circles to a wider and more diverse set of duty bearers. And this starts with governments. Around 60 governments were represented at ambassador to minister rank at the 40 states pledged or reaffirmed concrete support of over $100 million on safety of journalists. At least 2 of those major countries are represented at this conference. From an advocacy standpoint, there's a new emphasis on governments having an obligation as duty bearers to ensure a secure environment for media. And it's a matter of good stewardship of resources to focus on media's key role as a public good for effective governance, anti-corruption, toward SDG achievement. So think for just a moment about SDG indicators 16.10.1 and 16.10.2. The reason the SDGs are not just some sort of sloganeering or virtue signaling by governments who may or may not have any intention to address peace and rights-based goals, the reason is because of these indicators. UN member states at head of state level unanimously adopted the SDGs. 130 heads of state were in one room. And this includes what can be seen as a reporting obligation on 16.10.1, which is, quote, verified cases of killing, kidnapping, enforced disappearance, arbitrary detention, and torture of journalists and associated media personnel, etc. And 16.10.2 on the number of countries that adopt and implement constitutional, statutory, or policy guarantees for public access to information. Another element to consider is the universal periodic review mechanism. Maybe I'll address that later. But when you speak to governments to offer support to achieve these commitments, you can remind them of what they actually committed to. At the level of the UN, more than 20 UN resolutions on safety of journalists have been adopted by the UN General Assembly, by the Human Rights Council, by UNESCO General Conference, and with progressively increased level of specificity and detail. And that's actually a lot of resolutions. I think between 20 and 26. It's an active field of work of the UN. And through the Plan of Action, Media Freedom Coalition, or more than we have 6 groups of friends. These are basically ambassadors at UN headquarters in New York, at Paris at UNESCO headquarters, OHCHR in Geneva, OSCE in Vienna, and the Council of Europe in Strasbourg, and the Organization of American States in Washington, D.C. I spoke about broadening impact of the Plan of Action, and another target has been to actually increase UN system-wide knowledge of freedom of expression and safety of journalists. So beyond just UNESCO Secretariat and other rights-based entities like OHCHR. In March, in Bangkok, the unit I manage will be organizing a training for regional UN country teams on freedom of expression and safety of journalists. UN officials need to understand freedom of expression and access to information. And there are many reasons why. But safety of journalists is relevant to achievement of all 16 SDGs, and it can be easy, well, hopefully not too easy, to send mixed messages on the right to freedom of expression when asked about combating hate speech or disinformation and so forth. It's a very nuanced subject. The first regional training for UN country teams was held in Montevideo in Uruguay in May, and the one for this region will be held in March in Bangkok. The decade of the Plan of Action also encouraged academic research to broaden stakeholders, and in fact, the majority of academic research on safety of journalists has been published since the Plan of Action kind of provided a framework. There's growing academic research analyzing how social media may facilitate threats, harassment, and attacks against journalists. And these attacks are often linked to one's personal identity. Closer? Yeah, sorry. Yeah, you're right. And we have set up a network, the Journalism Safety Research Academic Network, coordinated by the UNESCO chair at Sheffield University. So, on one end of the analysis, like-minded governments, other UN agencies, and academia appear more involved, more engaged in freedom of expression and safety of journalists, in addition to the core actors, you. but what about results and outcomes? I mentioned the 90% impunity figure for killing of journalists over the decade, and this is horrifying, 90%. But since 2012, since the UN Plan of Action, in other words, impunity for crimes against journalists has either decreased or stayed the same every year, from 95% of murders unpunished back in 2022, 10 years ago, to 86% so far this year. So year by year, either a decline or more or less the same. And during these 10 years, at least 50 national protection mechanisms have been established. And even if many countries do not have a formally established protection mechanism for safety of journalists, the UN plan also serves as a model to develop initiatives between state agencies and civil societies. You can sort of pick from it, like a la carte. In terms of country-level work, I'm just speaking now of work I'm directly aware of. But this year, UNESCO trained the judicial actors and members of the Royal Thai Police Academy on the safety of journalists and freedom of expression. This was held in April and May of this year in Bangkok, principally. And similar trainings have happened this year in Mindanao, in the Philippines, and in Bogor in Indonesia. The practical part of these trainings includes a mock press conference, a riot, a crime scene to reinforce the competencies of security forces in communicating with the media, as well as protecting journalists during high-pressure situations. And the personal interaction between representatives of media and police officials and trainers is really valuable, and almost inevitably there's interest on both sides to try to scale this effort, to enhance collaboration, minimize conflict, and achieve the highest standards of professionalism. And these UNESCO guidelines and toolkits have so far helped to train over 24,000 judicial actors and 11,500 law enforcement and security officials in more than 150 countries, mainly through MOOCs and other means as well. And these are specifically on issues related to freedom of expression, safety of journalists, access to information, impunity, and so forth. We also address the role of social media and growing disinformation and hate speech that's spread online. And these trainings, including one on media and elections, can be very timely in this region in view of the election calendars next year and amid our shrinking civic space. Okay, at country level, the Global Media Fund at UNESCO, this was established by the United Kingdom and Canada in 2020, is supporting projects involving more than 3,000 journalists, 600 lawyers, 120 different CSOs. And this global fund has supported over 1,000 cases of legal assistance provided to journalists in distress, over 70 cases of strategic litigation to support standard-setting precedents on freedom of expression and safety of journalists, and over 150 investigations on crimes against journalists since 2020. I know there's a lot of interest in collecting good practices in general, and I can bring to your attention the bi-monthly UNESCO newsletter, which highlights good practices by civil society and NGOs, and some 800 activities so far, which you may wish to review and to contribute to. While it's important to directly address threats to journalist safety and threats to free expression through funding and through proven tools, there's also like the underlying current to address. Trustworthy journalism requires a political and social environment that enables journalists to perform its role as a public good, for good governance, for debunking disinformation, for transmitting accurate life-saving health information, and so on. Press freedom correlates with Sustainable Development Goal achievement. And this decade has seen so much stigmatizing discourse against journalists, co-opting of journalists through politicians and because of social and political polarization. There may also be a crowding out of traditional values underpinning journalistic practices of impartiality and verification in competition with bloggers, influencers, advertisers, and so forth, mediated by and through the internet platforms. UNESCO's most recent General Conference of 193 member states unanimously affirmed journalism as a public good last year, following on the 2021 Windhoek Plus 30 Declaration on Press Freedom. And what we generally mean about public goods are services or commodities available to without so healthcare and education and roads and street lighting and parks.
Sorry, Mr. Jai, I cut your time,
Sure, you
but
can
we still have more time, so I give 10 minutes each speaker to explain our perspective. So you like more discussion
Yeah,
when
no
I
problem.
asking question, and then we have more
Yes,
deeper
yes,
on.
sorry about that,
on the-
everyone.
Sorry for our
Yeah.
time, because you only have 2 hours for in this session. So I will ask to the other to each speakers for your explanation about the cases that you face it in each country. I think it's really similar. Like even that in Timor-Leste we have the very good ranking in Southeast Asia, ranking 1. In global is 17. Give applause for Timor-Leste. So, but I think we have some cases, similar cases in the law regulation. So, in our collaboration, what you should do? Like, I mean, I think the one case is about the law or regulation that created by the political leader or governments. So, do you think that we should approach the government, our state, to change the law that we have same platform in Southeast Asia about defending press freedom in Southeast Asia? I want to go first to Jonathan.
Yeah, I'd be very cautious about using legislation to address these issues, like having the government intrude into journalism, into truth telling. A better approach might be self-regulation within the community. So that could be through a press council. Maybe a government official could be a representative of that council. But having the law, or like we've seen how laws that are well-intentioned can be used against, well, not just journalists, but also citizens, for yung freedom of expression, freedom of opinion. So you might have a good government now, but in the future, who's gonna say that it'll be a good government still? But you will have those laws. You will have, well, and then these laws could be used against us in the long run. So it really should be self-regulation within the community and with the communities that we serve.
Yeah, as I mentioned that Indonesia has a press law in 20 years ago, but the challenges is how the government still produce new legislations about to shrinking press freedom and freedom of expression. Yeah, so that's we need how we can to fight to legal threats until now, and IG is fully concerned how we can to advocating for that. And as example, previously also criminal code is still discussing in government and parliaments. Yeah, we have so many strategies to can how to hold on of the criminal codes to the parliament. Yeah, so it's like Australia have demonstrated in a 40 region in Indonesia. We also gain of the global solidarity to can push the government and parliament, and also we report to the United Nations. And also they call of the government to can have a consensus about to protect of the press freedom and freedom of expression. But the situation is hard because the political situation is really difficult. So since 2019, Indonesian government and parliament is like occupied by the oligarchs, the economy oligarchs, and they is like dominates of the natural resources, and they are weak of the anti-corruptions law, and they produce so many legislation to can it's like economic investment in Indonesia. Yeah, so it's a relate how the political situation now is dominate with the oligarchs, economic oligarchs, and they want to silencing of the critical group and silencing of the critical journalists. Yeah, so I learned how the Southeast Asia government is like copycats the regulation, expanding each country. It's like criminal codes. Probably the Indonesian government is copycat from the Cambodian, from the Malaysian government, and also in the new criminal code we including about disinformation or regulating about the fake news. And previously experience, Malaysia and Singapore is the first country who have about fake news regulation. And yeah, it's important to know about the trend of how the legal trade become the similar problem in mostly in a Southeast Asia country. Yeah, but we need to work together with lawyers network, because if we talk about impunity, we talk about how we can to fight the legal trade, how we can to push the good prosecution and anything else, we need to work together with the network, with the lawyers network. And AJI, since long ago, we built, it's like a legal press aid. And Mas Ade, LBHPS here, is also is important stakeholder in Indonesia to, it's like journalist safety. And I don't know how about the experience in each country, but it's really important that we can expand of the lawyers network in also in a regional or international network, so they can to share about the experience, how to can help the journalist organization to can fight the legal threat, how they can to advocating of the journalist case, or how they can to stop impunity and something like that. Yeah, so we need to work together. And thirdly, also we can to make sure how the safety mechanism in our country is working is a good maybe it's good mechanisms like that. But the safety mechanism, and need 3 items. One is about the capacity building of the journalists as well, including about the physical safety, digital safety. So every journalist have a good skill and knowledge, how they can know about the risk and how they can handle as a fast response if they become a victim from various of kind of the violence. And the 3, we can to collaborating with another human rights institution and with the media owners, because it's really important. One of the first responsibility to give a protect to their journalists. If they ignoring about this responsible to handle this, so it's really hard for the journalists to have a protection from the media owner. Yeah, it's maybe just, it's like a simple.
Sorry. So I would like to ask to the Cambodia and Malaysia, how is human activists work closely to the journalists association and journalists and media activists? So, you have a lot of influence in digital era and social media, they can influencing government in this time, and how to collaborate. Do you think that human rights activists is very important with collaborate the journalists to achieve, to promote the press freedom in Southeast Asia, Cambodia and Malaysia?
I think the role of the human rights defender is also, very important, and also could support, the work of the independent journalists regarding to, the information from the grassroots, and also, being the, the source of the journalists, that they can also receiving information, and also, working together to report, the issue from the grassroots level. However, if we observe about the situation in Cambodia, I think we are challenges to work with the human rights defenders in 2017. Since our independent media were attacked by the government, and also since that time, the Cambodian human rights defenders, most of the outstanding human rights defenders, also were accused by the government as well, and they are now living exiles the country. So it also creates, the fear environment to the local human rights defender, while they are very hesitant to provide the information, talking with the journalists, because they will be recognized, and also paintings coloring with the opposition party when they are very actively to provide information and to share the information from the grassroots levels to the journalists. So far, because the context is that the big opposition party in Cambodia was dissolved by the Supreme Court, while the opposition supporter, they are still very active at the grassroots level, but they active without the party existing. So it is easy to local authority to accuse them, and of course more than hundreds of the opposition supporter was accused by the court, and the case still in the court, and they also, I can say that they also putting the pressure themselves when they express their opinion, especially the opinions through online platforms, through social media. Even though the social media, the authorities still using the criminal code, especially inciting incitement law, in order to accuse those opposition party, even though the social media activists as well. So it's a bad condition to the collaboration between the human rights defender and also the local journalists.
I want to offer to Washala, but after I will open question and answer to our participant in this room, and also we have participant in virtual meeting. So if any question in our friends, our colleagues in that attending our virtual conference, can you send the question via our techniques in here, and then send us the question, and we'll give directly to the speakers to answer. And also we'll give the opportunity to the all participants here to feel free to asking question and any ideas that you can do together. So, Wasala.
Thank you very much. I think that's a really relevant question, and it's also a question that CIJ has struggled for many years. CIJ, I mean, the origin of CIJ dates back to 1998, when five journalists who were experiencing challenges with regards to independent news and censorship during the start of the Reformasi era came together to say, we need to do something to challenge the status quo, right? So they formed a website called Saksi, Witness, to produce their own independent news. But as they were doing that, interestingly enough, at the same time, Malaysia Kini, which also brought together independent journalists, started off as an independent portal way ahead of time, right? So, so these two tractions are really, happened in parallel. But then we realized it's not just about producing news. It is about changing the environment, and pushing back and fighting, right? And that's what led to CIJ to what we are now, which is about, advocacy, pushing for law reform, creating spaces for engagement, making sure the voices of those who are marginalized, who are at risk, are heard, are mainstream, right? And in that regard, of course, you can't just function as an advocacy organization, because then you'll be challenged to who the hell are you, right? So that brings about the collaboration. Yeah? And multi-stakeholder collaboration, I think, is what has sustained CIJ, but also sustained media in general, because media, can't just come together and say, hey, as a union, I'm fighting something. As a media organization, I'm fighting for something. You have to work together. Yeah, and some of our most successful strategies, I would say, is when we do work together, right? I'm so happy to have friends from NUJ and Garam here, because you have three different representation. You have CSO representation in the room, you have trade union representation in the room, and you have a media organization, representing themselves in the room. Yeah, and when we do come together, there are different things that we could do. Yeah, first and foremost, of course, while we're pushing for law and policy reform, and I completely agree with you, no to new laws, except for right to information legislation, but more to mechanisms, right? What we need are structures. So all three organizations who are here actually are also part of a pro tem committee set up to establish the Media Council. So we work together in that regard, a multi-stakeholder engagement. We also come together when we talk about setting up legal defense, right? There is a legal defense fund available on freedom of expression, which is also accessible to media. Yeah, we are also in the midst of setting up a Malaysian media lawyers network. It's a work in progress. Yeah. But these engagements show that we have to come together. And recently, even when it comes to issues around, say, fact-checking, yeah, fact-checking is the most resource-intensive initiative. Yeah, we can't do it on our own. And Imran's here, who is from Jomchak. So Jomchak is another initiative which brought together different stakeholders. You have not just media, but you have academics there, you have civil society, you have data scientists sitting together in partnership. Yeah?
Thanks, Waksala.
Oh,
because you have really short time, so I give two persons, I hope one man and one woman, to ask questions to the 5 speakers in here. If you have any questions. Or for our colleagues in that attending in virtuals can give also question. You have 2 persons can ask the question. Oh, some colleagues in there. Please mention your name and where I come from.
Thank you. Tony from Thailand. A question to Khun Nop, something I found very interesting in your presentation. Thank you. Right, I would not be silenced. Khun Nop, yeah, I was very surprised to learn about the situation in Cambodia of senior journalists also working for the government. Isn't that like in any other country? I think there have been this concern about conflict of interest, right? Whether they can reconcile two different spectrums in their job. So I wonder if has media associations in Cambodia raised concern about this potential conflict of interest? What is being done to maybe like push back at this kind of culture? And which bring me to a second point as well, that even today, earlier we had a guest, a very senior official from the Ministry of Information here. I was actually very surprised about that. It's like to have someone from the government speaking at a platform that's supposed to be about free speech and media rights. How do you reconcile that? Like, I just wonder, like how do you reconcile those two spectrums as well?
Okay, one more question. Oh.
Hello everyone, I'm Nura from Sindikasi, Union for Media and Creative Industry Worker in Indonesia. Thanks for this opportunity, and that's a very insightful discussion. And talk about the strategy for promote the press freedom. I just wondering about the participation of the union, especially for the journalist union. I just wondering how union can be involved in promoting press freedom, and for specific for the union organization in Frano. Do you think that journalists has to organize themselves so they can promote more for the press freedom? So the press freedom start from the union, so we can more promote and more, campaign, because it start from the union. I don't know, is it included in the strategy to promote the press freedom, or do you think any other option to involve the journalist union? I think that maybe some of us not join the union, but I think that most important, especially for in Indonesia, union for journalists is very limited, and I think we can also collaborate with the union to promote press freedom. Thank you.
Thank you for Nura and Mr. Tony. So maybe Mr. Nob first asking answer the question
thank you,
from
Tony,
Tony
for asking question. It's not strange in Cambodia when government appointed journalists to be the government advisor and also the government officer, while it also happens to the other sector as well. In Cambodia, I think it is also related to the politics and how the government want to control the country forever. In Cambodia, we have NGO. On the other hand, we also have Congo, government, non-government organization. So they also have been working very competitively with the non-governmental organization. They also, receive funding from the other country like, China. So this is, the ways that also the non-governmental organization, especially, the human rights organization, have been working confronted with the other group that, supported by the government. We also have the same at the union level. With the union, they have the independent union. On the other hand, there's another group of union pros to the government, and they also work and also, mobilize their supporter, like government worker and also the informal worker as well, to support them and to make sure that they can work in order to promote the government propaganda, and also to like conducting some of activity against the independent union as well. And the union president also, have been promoted as the government advisor. With the government, with the Ministry of Labor advisor, with the Ministry of Interior as well. With the journalists, on the journalist side, it is the same, like I have said and I have, indicate at least 2 of the journalists union president. One is that the Secretary of State of Ministry of Interior. He is the president of the Union of the Journalists. And another guys that just appointed recently is the president of Cambodian Club of Journalists. However, he already resigned from the Club of Journalists, but he has not resigned from the editor-in-chief of the television. So how the independencies of the work of editor-in-chief to to like supervise the editorial team and also the newsroom independency. Yeah, so this is and regarding to the conflict of interest, I think we haven't stated in any law related to the journalist pro law. For example, in our press law, there's no provision mentioned that the journalist should not be appointed as the government officer.
Mr. Jonathan want to ask, answer the question come from Nura about the strategy that you should together.
Yes. The question is whether journalists should organize into unions. The answer is definitely, and that will definitely help promote press freedom because we believe that economics is a press freedom issue. It is much more difficult to be independent or to perform your watchdog function as media if your working conditions and economic situation is precarious. It's very easy to fall into traps of unethical practices if you're not paid well, or if you don't even have, for example, safety protocols at your office. Organizing also makes it easier because you speak a similar language. So when we have campaigns at NUJP, we can reach out to members who are working in different newsrooms and talk to them about the campaigns and about the threats that we have. It also stresses that journalists are actually our workers too, and we have to stand in solidarity with other workers. I mean, it's easy to fall into the trap that when we cover, for example, politicians or high-level government like officials, that we are at par with them or that we are like them. Sorry, but yeah, at the end of the day, we are workers and we have to fight for our rights before we can. As we fight for the rights of others as well. Thank you very much. They said
Thank you.
time's up.
Give applause for our speakers.
So, Souvenir, you have a question in your signal. Yeah, please.
Sorry, but I will asking to the timekeeper if you still have time to answer the question because we have question. Okay, 5 minutes. Okay, sorry. We received some question from our friends in virtual. So okay. Okay, it is from Sinta from Indonesia. So the question is, how can your organization work together in the future to pressure government in Southeast Asia to overcome all regulation that undermine press freedom and human rights? And the second one, what is the right strategy because the pressure for the journalists is getting stronger in with authoritarian government? So maybe I give to the 5 speakers to give the perspective, or yeah, all statement from the each speakers. Yeah, so maybe Wasala, go ahead. Yeah.
Thank you. I think it's well established that most governments share a same playbook, right? And the playbook is not just within Southeast Asia. They compare their playbooks with Trump and with Modi and many other leaders. The more regressive, the more powerful the playbook is, right? I think from our end, we need to rethink and reimagine our playbook. What does it need to look at? I think the most critical thing is its power in numbers
and power in solidarity and voices. Because the more we are able to organize ourselves through unions, at the national level and at the regional level, we get to push a particular kind of agenda. We need to constantly push, right? And solidarity is beyond us just coming out and issuing statement. Solidarity is retaining the voices, right? Making sure, the next few decades, we don't lose the power of being the fourth estate of democracy. Yeah, and that's why I think initiatives such as this are very, very critical for all of us. Yep, thank you very much.
I think one thing is that because, at the regional level, we have a lot of, common issue. So because we have common issues, so that why we have to address it together, right? And I'm not quite sure if, other country have this mechanism, but I'm defining, the UN mechanism is the ones important that we can work together. For example, like, in Cambodia, our government always, report about the human rights situation through, for example, like UPO, ICCPO. So the question is that how the local, organization can put our pressure, through this mechanism in order to make sure that the government can, responsible and also, provide their commitment to improve the situation. And not just commitment without improvement, but the commitment that, other, development country can be the witness and also can, use their role in order to, provide the recommendation and also monitoring the improvement as well.
Okay, we just heard about how each country have the good internal mechanism that initiated by the JSO or journalist organization in each country, so we can to leverage for each mechanism to regional scale and also international scale. I think for a year program, we can start with what the priority we can do together. The first from this collaboration, we will to is like develop joint monitoring on press freedom situation in Southeast Asia. We will launch tools to monitoring, so everyone can to access of the data of the real time of the situation in Southeast Asia. From the platform, we can know about the trend of the violence, the trend of the legal trade from these countries, and also from that you can use the data from research, from advocating, for many kind of we can to do to pressure together. Before we meet here, we also has been trying to strongest of our solidarity. It's like if any case, the important case in Philippines, we release the joint statement. We release it's like an open letter to the government, so it makes like the pressure together for this solidarity. It's also it's what happened in Malaysia or Indonesia. We with the same strategy we publish is like a joint statement, something like that. And secondly, the important thing, and we can how we can to increase the awareness of about the digital and physical safety in these countries. It's why in this regional conference, after regional conference, we will have it's like a digital and physical safety training for the 6 countries here, and they can to share their skill and knowledge to the local journalists. Yeah, see, it's one of the simply of the our collaboration for a year. Of course, that is not all enough. Well, we need to strengthening how we can to more effective strategic to handle. But I think the solidarity and collaboration is one important key that we can make together today.
Okay, we have
With the UNESCO representative.
okay. Before I'm going to UNESCO representative, maybe Jonathan want to add some more, and then to the UNESCO.
Just that I agree. They already gave a lot of.
So you are
So maybe from UNESCO point that we can do, what kind of a strategy that we can add more in our collaboration?
Yeah, well, I agree as well, but I don't know how germane this is, but when UNESCO works with the governments, you know, the first PowerPoint we put on the screen is the commitments they made in the Universal Periodic Review 16.10.2, because they're there. And I think just as an exercise, if you went to the OHCHR site and looked at Cambodia's commitment, for instance, I'm quite sure, because I actually looked, that you'll see the keyword freedom of expression appear many times. And the service of the United Nations is to ask, you know, we work principally with the, you know, with the information ministries and so forth. You know, by and large, these are fairly apolitical people, and SDG 16 is about peace. You know, they're literally reporting on, you know, in support of peace. They're champions of peace, as it were. So you know, in many ways, it's you can use these commitments and ask, how can we support you to report on these commitments? And oftentimes that can lead to some sort of fruitful discussion. But you know, I'm taking a very narrow perspective. Yeah.
Thank you. We still have one more question in this room.
ចាជំរាបសួរខ្ញុំឈ្មោះឆនសុគន្ធាខ្ញុំមកពីខាង CCRM VOD Sorry I will speak in Khmer it's make more easy ចាពាក់ព័ន្ធនឹងរឿងសំណួរដោយសារខ្ញុំឃើញ panelist it's okay ដោយសារខ្ញុំឃើញ panelist ភាគច្រើនគាត់លើកពី issue ដែលវា happen នៅក្នុងតំបន់ណាប៉ុន្តែខ្ញុំចង់សួរថាតើរាល់ថ្ងៃហ្នឹងយើងគួរតែមានអីសម្រាប់បន្ទាប់ពី next conference របស់យើងហ្នឹងយើងគួរតែពិនិត្យមើលថាតើយើងមាន network អីមួយដែល strong ហើយបើសិនជាគ្នាយើងដែលនៅក្នុង room នេះឬក៏មានអ្នកសារព័ត៌មានផ្សេងទៀតដែលគាត់មានការប្រឈមគាត់អត់ហ៊ាននៅក្នុងគាត់ហ៊ាននៅក្នុងការទៅសេឬក៏រាយការណ៍ព័ត៌មានប៉ុន្តែគាត់មានការប្រឈមដូចជានៅក្នុងស្ថាប័នឬក៏គាត់ជា freelancer អីចឹងគួរតែមានការ form ជា next strong network មួយនៅក្នុងតំបន់ណាដើម្បីមានការជួយពួកគាត់ឲ្យបានទាន់ពេលវេលាដោយសារយើងមើលឃើញថា network ហ្នឹងនៅក្នុងស្ថាប័នមួយតែងតែមាន network ផ្សេងគ្នាអញ្ចឹងនៅក្នុង regional conference នេះដោយសារភាគច្រើនយើងទៅចែកគ្នាពាក់ព័ន្ធនឹងរឿងបញ្ហាអ្នកសារព័ត៌មានអញ្ចឹងយើងគួរតែមាន network មួយឲ្យ strong ដើម្បីងាយស្រួលនៅក្នុងការ support អ្នកសារព័ត៌មាននៅក្នុងតំបន់ដែលគាត់មានបញ្ហាកើតឡើងចា៎នេះគឺជាបញ្ហាមួយដែលខ្ញុំចង់ឃើញថា result បន្ទាប់ពី conference របស់យើងតែយើងគួរតែមានបង្កើត network ឬក៏ network ដែលយើង existing ហើយនឹងយើងបញ្ចូលថាតើមានស្ថាប័នសារព័ត៌មានឬក៏ក្រុម independent ដែលគាត់មានបញ្ហាការប្រឈមហើយនៅក្នុង network ហ្នឹងវាងាយស្រួលដែរនៅក្នុងការចែករំលែកព័ត៌មានការប្រឈមឬក៏ការតម្រូវការផ្សេងរបស់ពួកគាត់ចា៎អរគុណ
I think I can help with the translation if like very brief on question. She's kind of asking and also commenting like after this regional conference, will there be any stronger regional network to help like journalists in each country who are facing difficulties in their daily work? So some sort of this.
So yeah, I think this collaboration is kind of the mechanism already to, you know, respond to issues that happen and also confront it to the work of independent journalists. behind of this collaboration lies, we have agreed and we also signed our MOU this afternoon about our collaboration. We agreed to, monitor, to keep our monitoring closely to the case, all case happen, against journalists. And from our monitoring, we also have discussed a lot as well about the mechanism that we can, using our report as evidence for our advocacy purpose. I also highlight my view from this morning's speech, my speech this morning regarding to the, the self-shelter for supporting the journalists as well, because currently we also, some of the independent journalists, when they working, they also, risky with their and security. So we haven't any secure mechanism yet in order to make sure that they, they are safe when, any accusation or any arrest or, threaten to their life. So I think this would be the next, maybe the next agenda that, the collaborative partner would discuss and also define the, immediate action to respond to this issue.
I received two more questions in virtual, but what do you think? You still have time to continue? The timekeeper? 3 minutes. Sorry. Oh. 3 minutes. Okay, I apologize for the people that asking questions, but you don't have time to answer. But I believe that we still have more discussion in the next feature. So I would like to say thank you so much for our panels. That's very interesting. We have you get a lot of strategy that we can do together in our collaboration. So through this collaboration and solidarity, we believe that we will strengthening our networking to fight for freedom of the press and human rights and freedom of expression in the Southeast Asia, because it is part of human rights. Change is possible if you will do together and better place in our country. Thank you. I'm Zebonevera. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you, the panelists and the moderator. Before freeing you up for lunch, on behalf of the organizers, we have a few important announcements to make. In this afternoon, we will have 3 breakout sessions. So please make sure.
Recording stopped.